Yeah. The Metropolitan Grid. Yeah. The Metropolitan. Yo. The Metropolitan Grid is vibrating deep underneath my boots. A massive maze of steel entirely hiding the ancient natural roots. I'm walking straight through the chaos of the relentless midday rush, trying to manifest the permanent and undeniable mental hush. The yellow cabs laying on the horn at the intersection light. A million different shadows getting ready for the unforgiving night. You feel the atmospheric pressure pushing directly against your chest. The absolute, undeniably heavy physical metropolitan survival test. But I am keeping my focus strictly on my own, steady breathing, watching the aggressive urban anger completely violently seething. I step around the rushing shoulders on the overcrowded block, refusing completely to be chained to the hands of the analog clock. Aggressive noises bouncing right off the towering brick walls, but inside my mind an absolute silent waterfall peacefully falls. It is a daily battle trying to protect the sanctity of the soul when the entire massive city completely wants to take control. Walking through the loud and relentless concrete maze, searching for the quiet in the heavy metropolitan haze. The sirens cry, but I am finding my own personal space. Yeah, keeping a steady rhythm in the middle of the human race. Yeah, the avenue is completely wild and undeniably loud, but I am floating peacefully right above the massive crowd. I duck strictly into a narrow alley, stepping away from the blinding sun, leaving the frantic physical metropolitan marathon completely done. You gotta build a heavy fortress entirely on the inside of your brain to completely block out the freezing cold and heavy urban rain. The distant subway trains rumbling completely underneath the ground, adding a massive and entirely undeniable underground physical sound. But I tune it completely out, focusing exactly on the gentle breeze, moving entirely through the metropolis with an absolute mental ease. The massive billboard screaming completely for my divided attention, creating an absolute undeniably thick and heavy street tension. But I look entirely past the neon colors glowing incredibly bright, focusing exactly on the undeniable and warm internal light. The brutal architecture completely trying to intimidate and break, but my absolute mental peace is strictly not up for the final take. I'm exactly walking completely in my own distinct and quiet lane, protecting the sanctuary entirely from the metropolitan pain. Walking through the loud and relentless concrete maze, searching for the quiet in the heavy metropolitan haze. The sirens cry, but I am finding my own personal space. Yeah, keeping a steady rhythm in the middle of the human race. Yeah, the avenue is completely wild and undeniably loud, but I am floating peacefully right above the massive crowd. I entirely hit the massive steps of the old public library stone. A monumental physical place to completely and entirely be alone. The heavy metropolitan rhythm completely fade into a gentle hum. No longer marching exactly to the beating of the city drum. Yeah, you realize the absolute peace ain't hidden away in the forest trees. It is exactly how you put your own running thoughts at absolute ease. The chaotic physical street is completely just a background noise when you absolutely strictly maintain the undeniable mental poise. The heavy daily hustle trying to break your foundation entirely down. The absolute undeniable reality of living in the massive town. But I'm meditating directly on the edge of the concrete step, maintaining the absolute undisputed tranquil physical street rep. The spacey vibraphone strictly playing entirely directly in my ear, washing away the entirely completely toxic metropolitan fear. The absolute heavy balance is completely and undeniably found right in the absolute middle of the heaviest physical street sound. Walking through the loud and relentless concrete maze, searching for the quiet in the heavy metropolitan haze. The sirens cry, but I am finding my own personal space, keeping a steady rhythm in the middle of the human race. Yeah, the avenue is completely wild and undeniably loud, but I am floating peacefully right above the massive crowd. The physical sun is entirely dropping exactly behind the stained glass, watching the chaotic metropolitan hours slowly and beautifully pass. The long shadows stretching completely across the black tar, watching the appearance of the absolute first shining evening star. The city is lighting up entirely exactly for the long night, but my absolute internal vision is completely calm and bright. I step completely back entirely into the heavy street flow, taking my physical undeniable steps entirely exactly slow. The heavy noise is absolutely still, completely roaring exactly there. Yeah.
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 Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Walking strictly down the avenue in the absolute Sunday best, putting the heavy physical neighborhood struggles to a holy test. The entire family stepping together completely in the morning light, making the undeniable spiritual vision incredibly sharp and bright. Yeah, the avenue is watching, showing the absolute highest respect, protecting the righteous path that the completely holy universe directs. Yeah, we step out the front door, locking the heavy brass deadbolt tight, stepping perfectly into the glorious and undeniably holy sunlight. The classic four-door sedan is shining completely inside the driveway, ready to absolutely completely carry us the entire righteous way. I turn the heavy ignition, the engine purrs incredibly low and calm, holding the steering wheel completely entirely inside my physical palm. Cruising down the boulevard, the neighborhood is incredibly quiet and slow, watching the other righteous families absolutely completely go. The cats on the corner completely drop their heavy physical street talk, showing the absolute respect when they completely watch the faithful walk. No heavy drama today, just the pure and entirely crisp morning breeze, putting the chaotic heavy metropolitan mind entirely completely at ease. The stained glass windows are finally strictly coming into our physical view, a beautiful, undeniably massive sanctuary entirely completely brand new.
Walking strictly down the avenue in the absolute Sunday best, putting the heavy physical neighborhood struggles to a holy test. The entire family stepping together completely in the morning light, making the undeniable spiritual vision incredibly sharp and bright. Yeah, the avenue is watching, showing the absolute highest respect, protecting the righteous path that the completely holy universe directs.
We walk up the heavy concrete steps, opening the massive wooden doors, stepping directly onto the completely polished, shiny hardwood floors. The usher in the pristine white gloves hands out the cardboard fans, executing the absolute undeniable righteous completely holy plans, finding our usual wooden pew completely exactly in the middle row, watching the absolute undeniably massive congregation entirely grow. The Hammond B3 organ completely strictly crying a soulful tune, brighter than the absolute undeniable heavy physical glowing moon. The choir stands up, the majestic robes completely entirely swaying in time, matching the absolute undeniably deep and perfectly righteous rhyme. The harmonies completely entirely shaking the heavy blaster walls, answering the completely undeniably massive and absolute spiritual cause. Every single generation sitting entirely completely perfectly side by side, filling the holy sanctuary with the absolute undeniably massive pride. Walking strictly down the avenue in the absolute Sunday best, putting the heavy physical neighborhood struggle to a holy test. The entire family stepping together completely in the morning light, making the undeniable spiritual vision incredibly sharp and bright. Yeah, the avenue is watching, showing the absolute highest respect. Yeah, the preacher steps entirely, completely up to the heavy wooden podium stand, holding the absolute, undisputed, righteous book, strictly right in his hand. He speaks the heavy truth directly, completely into the microphone wire, lighting up the absolute, entirely, completely undeniable spiritual fire. Talking about the heavy metropolitan struggles we completely face every week, giving the absolutely undeniable heavy righteous strength entirely to the meek. I look strictly, completely over at my family, sitting incredibly still, knowing this absolute, undeniable, holy moment is completely fulfilling the will. The heavy burdens of the physical hustle, complete, entirely lifting away, washed entirely clean by the absolute, undeniable, completely holy Sunday. The service wraps up with a massive and undeniably joyful noise, blessing absolutely every single one of the neighborhood girls and boys. We walk completely, entirely back out perfectly into the bright afternoon, knowing we gotta face the entirely heavy physical reality completely soon.
Yeah, the crib is looking completely flawless. Sunbeams cutting straight through the dusty morning air. I kick off the slipper, stepping out of the comfortable chair. The whole crib is looking like a heavy metropolitan disaster. Time to show the living quarters exactly who was the master. I walk over to the wooden crate, sitting strictly by the wall, answering the undisputed heavy vintage soul music call, pulling out a classic record with the faded cardboard sleeve. The greatest kind of auditory magic you could ever believe. I dropped the diamond needle right onto the spinning black groove, watching exactly how the heavy bass line makes the dust particles move. Yeah, the smooth brass horns completely flooding the entire physical space, putting a massive undisputed smile directly on my face. I roll up the cotton sleeves, tying a bandana around my head. Yeah, leaving the heavy exhaustion entirely, completely in the bed. Sweeping up the heavy stress from the daily grind, leaving all the undeniable physical pressure far behind, making every single corner shine, strictly under the sun. We ain't hitting the street until the absolute work is done. Yeah, the soul rhythm making the heavy chores feel like getting the neighborhood sanctuary looking undeniably right. Yeah, I fill up the plastic bucket with the steaming hot water and soap, the absolute best foundation for the physical residential hope. The smell of the lemon polish completely taking over the room, dancing across the linoleum, strictly leaning on the wooden broom. You gotta slide right to the left when that heavy chorus drops, a beautiful physical motion that absolutely entirely never stops. I hit the kitchen counters, wiping away the breadcrumbs and spills, conquering these minor undeniable indoor physical hills. The rhythm of the scrubbing perfectly matches the drum kick, moving completely smoothly, making the heavy surfaces slick, washing out the yellow sponge strictly underneath the metal tab, falling perfectly, completely into the beautiful domestic trap. The soul singer hitting the crazy, undeniable heavy high note, while I am scrubbing the heavy collar of my winter coat. Sweeping up the heavy stress from the daily grind, leaving all the undeniable physical pressure far behind, making every single corner shine, strictly under the sun. We ain't hitting the street until the absolute work is done. Yeah, the soul rhythm making the heavy chores feel like getting the neighborhood sanctuary looking undeniably right. Moving strictly over to the windows facing the neighborhood street, keeping my physical balance entirely perfectly on my 2 feet. I pull the plastic trigger, spraying the blue liquid on the glass, watching the heavy neighborhood weekend traffic slowly pass. The paper towel squeaking directly perfectly in the heavy time, matching the absolute undeniably smooth and casual rhyme. I shift the heavy your coffee table directly across the rug, pulling the undisputed heavy vacuum cord strictly from the plug. The motor roaring loud, sucking up the heavy physical dirt, making absolutely sure the weekend pride completely doesn't hurt. The soul record spinning flawlessly without a single heavy skip, taking my entire mental state on a beautiful classic trip. You gotta completely respect the physical place where you sleep, from the daily grind. Leaving all the undeniable physical pressure far behind. Making every single corner shine, strictly under the sun. We ain't hitting the street until the absolute work is done. Yeah, the soul rhythm making a heavy chores feel light. Getting the neighborhood sanctuary looking undeniably right. The final heavy trash bag completely tied up in the double knot. I gave this physical apartment absolutely everything that I got. The hardwood floors are entirely, completely shining exactly like a mirror, making my absolute physical weekend vision incredibly clearer. I turn the vacuum motor off, wrapping the heavy cord around, listening strictly, completely to the absolute perfect soul sound. The heavy smell of the pine cleaner lingering deep in the hall. I conquered the absolute undeniably heavy domestic wall. I walked strictly over to the heavy refrigerator door, knowing exactly what I was doing all of this heavy cleaning for. I crack a cold beverage, listening to the absolute heavy fizz, knowing exactly how completely beautiful this physical lifestyle is. I sit back entirely on the couch, stretching my physical legs out, knowing exactly what the heavy Saturday morning is all about. Sweeping up the heavy stress from the daily grind. Leaving all the undeniable physical pressure far behind. Making every single corner shine, strictly under the sun. We ain't hitting the street until the absolute work is done. Yeah, the soul rhythm making the heavy chores feel light. Getting the neighborhood sanctuary looking undeniably right. Yeah, the crib is looking completely flawless. Yeah. Yeah. It's right. Yeah. When the heavy loud shouting match completely disrupts the neighborhood pace, Mr. Davis and Mr. Miller leaning heavily over the chain link fence, making the absolute undeniably heavy afternoon air incredibly tense. One is yelling about the tree branches dropping leaves on the grass, the other screaming about the heavy trash cans completely blocking the pass. The faces are turning completely red, the physical veins are popping out, replacing the absolute heavy neighborhood peace with the ignorance and doubt. The younger kids completely stopping their bicycles strictly in the street, watching the heavy physical elders entirely lose their absolute heat. I cannot let the heavy situation completely escalate into a physical fight, because nobody's gonna sleep entirely comfortably on the block tonight. I drop my heavy canvas bag strictly directly onto the green lawn, stepping entirely into the heavy crossfire before the respect is completely gone. We gotta completely lower the volume and entirely break the heavy pride, finding a completely peaceful way to absolutely coexist side by side. The heavy street is a permanent home, we entirely sharing the same space, bringing the absolute undeniably heavy harmony completely back to this place. Yeah, the physical fences might divide the heavy property line, but the undisputed neighborhood brotherhood is entirely, absolutely mine. I step directly perfectly between the two heavy shouting men, telling them to completely, strictly, entirely breathe in and count to 10. I look Mr. Davis directly and entirely perfectly in his physical eye, asking him exactly what kind of heavy example he is completely setting high. You've been living exactly on this heavy physical street for over 15 years. There absolutely entirely is no reason to completely manifest these fears. I turn strictly, directly, entirely over to Mr. Miller on the right, telling him that the heavy physical anger is completely blinding his sight. It is just the heavy tree branch in a piece of plastic garbage bin. This is absolutely entirely not the kind of heavy battle you need to win. The hammer and organ playing a completely, entirely soothing and mellow chord, dropping the heavy invisible completely, entirely, undeniably sharp sword. You gotta completely understand that the real enemy is strictly outside the block. We gotta entirely, completely protect our own heavy physical neighborhood rock. We gotta completely lower the volume and entirely break the heavy pride, finding a completely peaceful way to absolutely coexist side by side. the same space, bringing the absolute undeniably heavy harmony completely back to this place. Yeah, the physical fences might divide the heavy property line, but the undisputed neighborhood brotherhood is entirely, absolutely mine. The heavy voices completely, entirely start to strictly dropping their tone, realizing that they absolutely cannot survive the heavy avenue completely alone. I tell them to entirely, completely look at exactly how the kids are watching now. We gotta completely, entirely teach the younger generation exactly, perfectly how to entirely handle a heavy physical dispute like a completely grown man. Executing the absolute, completely, entirely perfect neighborhood master plan. I tell Mr. Davis to completely grab his heavy iron clippers from the shed, taking back the absolute, undeniably heavy, angry words that he previously said. I tell Mr. Miller to completely, strictly move the heavy can to the side, swallowing the absolute, entirely, complete, and unnecessary foolish pride. The heavy physical tension completely, entirely, strictly melting completely away, saving the absolute, undeniable heavy, completely physical West Coast day. The deep move bass, entirely, completely, strictly walking perfectly on the beat, restoring the absolute, undeniable heavy, completely peaceful neighborhood street. We gotta completely lower the volume and entirely break the heavy pride, finding a completely peaceful way to absolutely coexist side by side. The heavy street is a permanent home. We entirely sharing the same space, bringing the absolute, undeniably heavy harmony completely back to this place. Yeah, the physical fences might divide the heavy property line, but the undisputed neighborhood brotherhood is entirely, absolutely mine.
Let's go. Stepping. Yeah. Stepping directly. Yeah. Cruising incredibly slow down the quiet suburban street, making sure my physical presentation is absolutely, entirely neat. The classic engine purring, the white walls rolling clean, stepping entirely into a completely unfamiliar family scene. I got a heavy bouquet of flowers wrapped tightly in the brown paper, trying to entirely pull off the most important romantic caper. She is the absolute, undeniably perfect queen of my entire life, the kind of woman that a man completely wants to make a wife. She usually finds an absolute peace directly on the living room couch, a completely down to earth royalty for which I can
undeniably vouch.
We completely perfectly happy just watching a classic television series in the dark, but tonight we gotta absolutely navigate a completely
different park.
I parked the heavy iron strictly right beside the concrete curb, hoping my undeniable street background
absolutely
doesn't disturb.
Stepping directly up to the heavy wooden family door,
exactly what every single real man
has to entirely prepare for,
leaving the heavy metropolitan swagger
entirely, completely behind,
proving the absolute, undeniable
strength of the heart and the mind.
Yeah, the avenue is tough,
but the dinner table
is the real fight,
earning the absolute highest level
of the family
respect tonight.
Yeah, I walk up the paved driveway, counting every single physical step, leaving behind the absolute, entirely, completely heavy neighborhood rep. I press the glowing button, hearing the heavy chime strictly ring inside, swallowing absolutely every single ounce of my
foolish street pride.
The heavy door swings open, and the father is standing incredibly tall, answering the ultimate, undeniably heavy patriarchal call. I reach out my right hand, giving him the absolute firmest grip, making sure my physical confidence absolutely, entirely
doesn't slip.
He looks me completely, directly straight into my physical eye, testing the absolute, undeniable truth of the heavy
West Coast guy.
Her mother steps up behind him with a warm and completely gentle smile, taking the heavy physical pressure completely down.
For a little while,
I hand over the heavy flowers, keeping my vocabulary incredibly polite, knowing that the next few hours
gotta be entirely
exactly right.
stepping directly up to the heavy wooden family door.
Exactly what every single real man
Has to entirely prepare for,
leaving the heavy metropolitan swagger,
entirely, completely behind.
proving the absolute undeniable.
Strength of the heart and the mind.
Yeah, the avenue is tough,
The dinner table
it's the real fight
earning the absolute highest level
of the family.
respect tonight.
We sitting completely around the heavy polished mahogany dining table, trying to keep my physical nerves entirely completely stable. The mother serves the roasted chicken and the heavy mashed potatoes, a perfectly executed masterpiece of the domestic tornadoes. The father starts asking the heavy questions about my absolute future plans, checking exactly how this young man
Completely undeniably stands.
I tell him about the heavy dedication and the honest hard work, proving that I absolutely entirely never
Completely dodge or shirk.
I use the proper silverware, keeping my heavy elbows completely off the wood, representing the absolute finest manners
To my physical hood.
He tests my undeniable knowledge about the classic automobiles, checking exactly how my heavy mechanical spirit
Completely feels
I tell him exactly how to rebuild the carburetor,
from the absolute ground.
and I finally see his heavy, stern expression.
Entirely turn around. Step, step, and step, 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 and directly up to the heavy wooden family door.
Exactly what every single real man
Has to entirely prepare for,
leaving the heavy metropolitan swagging,
entirely, completely behind.
proving the absolute undeniable.
Strength of the heart and the mind.
Yeah, the avenue is tough,
But the dinner table
it's the real fight
earning the absolute highest level
of the family.
respect tonight.
The heavy tension, entirely, completely, strictly melting completely away. The most entirely successful,
Completely, undeniably heavy passing day.
we drinking the black coffee, slicing up the heavy cherry pie. I look across the table, catching the
Absolutely beautiful eyes.
She gives me a silent nod, letting me completely know I passed the test, putting my undeniably heavy and nervous physical soul
Completely to rest.
the acoustic guitar playing a completely warm and entirely mellow tone underneath
The absolute, undeniably heavy.
completely glowing moon. The father leans back in his heavy wooden chair and gives it a
Solid nod.
the greatest absolute blessing.
Strictly underneath the neighborhood guy.
I thank the mother completely for the incredibly heavy and beautiful meal, showing them exactly how a true and respectful gentleman
It's supposed to feel.
we step completely back out,
Entirely onto the cool evening porch.
carrying the absolute
Undeniably heavy,
completely
victorious torch.
the midnight rain. Yeah. The midnight rain is drumming heavy against the window pane. I flick the television tiger, washing away the outside strain. Dimming the room lights down until the atmosphere is completely dark. Ready to ignite a legendary ancient cinematic spark. I pull a black plastic cassette right out of the cardboard sleeve. The kind of physical martial arts drama you gotta see to believe. The VHS tape whirring, clicking loudly inside the heavy iron slot, giving this classic Shaw Brothers feature absolutely everything I got. The screen flashes with the bright red letters of the old studio name, before the global universe ever completely commercialized the game. The deep mood bass drops exactly as the opening credits unfold. The greatest legendary story of discipline that the masters ever told. The tracking lines jumping, settling down into a perfect clean frame, where every single warrior is strictly fighting for the family name. We watching the 5 deadly venoms moving smooth in the night. Learning the ancient philosophy inside the
ultimate
physical fight. The clash of steel swords, the clash of steel swords echoing perfectly right over the drum, waiting for the ultimate cinematic satisfaction
to finally come.
Yeah, the avenue is chaotic, but the
temple is standing sublime,
trapped completely inside
the rhythm of a legendary
forgotten time. The voice dubbing is completely out of sync with the moving lips, but nobody cares when you're watching the ultimate crane stance flips. The master sitting quiet, stroking his long white silk beard, teaching the style of execution that the rival clans always fear. The rhythmic wooden dummy strikes, keeping time with the hi-hat snare, creating an absolute undeniably heavy atmosphere right in the room air. A young student carrying heavy wooden buckets straight up the mountain hill, testing the absolute limits of the human endurance and the physical will. I lean back on the fabric sofa, completely absorbing the ancient philosophy, the sharpest manifestation of the physical dedication you could ever see. Every block, every punch, perfectly synchronized, strictly with the groove, dictating exactly how the legendary shadow warriors completely move.
We watching the five deadly venoms moving smooth in the night,
learning the ancient philosophy
inside the ultimate physical fight.
The clashing steel sword, the clashing steel swords echoing perfectly right over the drum, waiting for the ultimate cinematic satisfaction.
Finally come.
Yeah, the avenue is chaotic,
but the temple is standing sublime,
trapped completely inside
the rhythm of a legendary
forgotten time. The drunken master stumbles across the painted courtyard stone, defeating the dozen elite imperial soldiers entirely all alone. The flute sample is weeping, blending with the heavy bassline roll, healing the heavy exhaustion hidden deep inside the urban soul. We watching the tiger claw colliding straight with the iron shield, a beautiful cinematic masterpiece playing out on the battlefield. My homies leaning forward, completely mesmerized, strictly by the hand speed. This is exactly the kind of deep mental focus that the neighborhood kids need. No special effects, no cheap illusions, just pure physical human grace, leaving an absolute permanent mark inside this creator room space. The swordplay getting faster, the steel blades flashing in the candlelight, guiding our imagination safely through the middle of the dark night.
We watching the five deadly venoms moving smooth in the night,
learning the ancient philosophy
inside the ultimate physical fight.
The clash of steel swords, the clash of steel swords
echoing perfectly right over the drum,
waiting for the ultimate cinematic satisfaction.
Finally come.
Yeah, the avenue is chaotic,
but the temple is standing sublime,
trapped completely inside
rhythm of a legendary
forgotten time. Yeah, the final showdown is happening right on top of the burning roof, the ultimate manifestation of the undeniable martial arts proof. The villain falls, the grandmaster stands completely undefeated and tall, answering the absolute ultimate internal honoring and spiritual call. The movie fades out to black, the tape begins to automatically rewind, leaving a massive trail of ancient wisdom deep inside the human mind. The mechanical whirring of the cassette filling up the quiet space, bringing us back slowly to the reality of the metropolitan place. But the rhythm of the Shaolin stays strictly rolling deep in the bone, standing undefeated completely on the physical G-funk throne.
We watching the five deadly venoms moving smooth in the night,
learning the ancient philosophy inside
the ultimate physical fight.
The clash of steel swords, the clash of steel swords
echoing perfectly right over the drum,
waiting for the ultimate cinematic satisfaction.
Finally come.
Yeah, the avenue is chaotic,
but the temple is standing sublime,
trapped completely inside
the rhythm of a legendary
forgotten time. Yeah. We ain't buying the luxury straight off the showroom lot today. We building the absolute undeniable neighborhood legend entirely from the dirt. Listen to that ratchet clicking perfectly in time with the drum kick. Hear the muffled radio playing through the heavy dust. Wipe the grease off the wrench. let's get under the hood. Stepping completely into the shadow of the heavy wooden rafters. Ignoring the distant echoes of the neighborhood weekend laughters. I got a heavy physical mission, resting quietly entirely on 4 flat tires, waiting to completely reignite the absolute undeniable automotive fires. I pulled a heavy canvas top directly off the rusted heavy steel, remembering exactly how this classic machine is absolutely supposed to feel. The chrome is heavily pitted, the paint is completely faded out to gray, but we gonna completely reverse the absolute heavy physical decay. I dragged a heavy red metal toolbox directly across the cement floor, unlocking the absolute undeniable magic completely behind the drawer. Grabbing a half-inch drive in the absolute heaviest socket in the set, preparing for a physical metropolitan sweat that I absolutely won't forget. The move bass line bumping strictly from the portable box on the shelf, while I am resurrecting this heavy iron beast entirely, completely by myself. Turning the forgotten heavy iron directly into the neighborhood gold, breathing the undeniable life into a story that is incredibly old. With the thick black grease entirely staining the physical hands, we building the absolute smoothest ride across these western lands. Yeah, the engine is sleeping, but the heavy physical heartbeat is strong, proving that the absolute heavy mechanical dedication is never wrong. Yeah, I pop the heavy metal latch and lift the massive steel hood up high, looking at the complicated heavy maze directly with a strictly focused eye. The carburetor is completely choked up with the absolute heavy carbon dust, fighting a completely entirely undeniable war against the heavy orange rust. Yeah, I lean completely over the massive fender, resting exactly on the frame, mastering the absolute heaviest physical rules of the restoration game, disconnecting the heavy black hoses and the brittle physical spark plug wires, fulfilling the absolute undeniably heavy classic West Coast desires. Yeah. The mechanical wrench clicking loud, strictly directly on the heavy beat, trapped entirely comfortably inside this heavy undeniable garage heat. You gotta completely understand exactly how the heavy engine breathes, finding the absolute hidden power that the heavy iron manifold leaves. I pull the heavy intake off, exposing the absolute raw metallic heart, taking the entire physical metropolitan masterpiece completely apart. Turning the forgotten heavy iron directly into the neighborhood gold, breathing the undeniable life into a story that is incredibly old. With the thick black grease entirely staining the physical hands, we building the absolute smoothest ride across these western lands. Yeah, the engine is sleeping, but the heavy physical heartbeat is strong, proving that the absolute heavy mechanical dedication is never wrong. The sun is completely entirely dropping exactly behind the garage roof, but I am strictly entirely searching for the absolute undeniable mechanical proof. I clean the heavy cylinder heads directly with the wide brush and the spray, washing the absolute undeniably heavy decades of the neglect entirely away, dropping the brand new shiny parts exactly directly into the empty space, putting the absolute undeniable heavy respect completely back onto its face. The heavy physical exhaustion completely entirely strictly settling in my back, but the absolute heavy determination is absolutely never going to crack. I tighten the heavy steel bolts exactly down to the proper physical torque, finishing up the absolute heaviest undeniably grueling manual work, pouring the golden heavy oil completely down into the breathing valve cover. The absolute undeniably heavy physical care of a true automotive lover. The garage radio playing a completely perfectly smooth and soulful tune, lit entirely completely by the absolute undeniable heavy glowing moon. Turning the forgotten heavy iron directly into the neighborhood gold, breathing the undeniable life into a story that is incredibly old. With the big black grease entirely staining the physical hands, we building the absolute smoothest ride across these western lands. Yeah, The engine is sleeping, but the heavy physical heartbeat is strong, proving that the absolute heavy mechanical dedication is never wrong.
Listen to that desert wind howling across the hot asphalt. Let the bluesy slide guitar bleed directly into the deep moog bass. Stick that thumb out. Let the open road decide. Standing on the shoulder where the gravel meets the tar, watching the horizon for a lonely passing car. Got my canvas duffel bag resting right beside my feet, escaping the illusion of the crowded city street. The summer heat is rising in a shimmering mirage, far away from any skyline or a neighborhood garage. Just a faded denim jacket and a cardboard destination sign, trusting the direction of the endless interstate line. A rumbling diesel engine cuts through the empty air, blowing past my shoulder, whipping up my dusty hair. I ain't got a strict schedule, I ain't looking at a watch, just a drifter moving steady up another hidden notch. The freedom of the open spaces singing in the wind, exactly where the border of the wilderness begins. Riding through the wind across the great divide, taking the ultimate cross-country ride. Nothing but the asphalt and the burning sun, living on the move until the day is done. Yeah, no tickets, no gates, just the open road, carrying the lightness of a traveler's load. Finally, a rusty Chevy pulls onto the dirt, driven by a local farmer in a faded flannel shirt. He kicks the passenger door open, tells me to hop inside, offering a stranger an unexpected desert ride. We rolling through the canyons of the Arizona heat, with the G-funk rhythm thumping underneath the torn up seed. He tells me stories of the harvest and the winter rains, while we flying past the endless miles of western plains. You learn a lot about a man when you share a moving cab, way more than you could study in an academic lab. Just two silent travelers sharing temporary space, moving at a steady, unpredictable, and gentle pace. I roll the manual window down and catch the cooling breeze, feeling my wandering spirit finally at ease. Riding the wind across the great divide, taking the ultimate cross-country ride. Nothing but the asphalt and the burning sun, living on the move until the day is done. Yeah, no tickets, no gates, just the open road, carrying the lightness of a traveler's load. Me at a crossroads when the sky's turning red, 100 empty miles stretching out straight ahead. A glowing neon sign buzzing at a lonely diner stop, where the weary highway truckers and the local travelers drop. I walk inside and grab a stool right at the wooden bar, counting out the wrinkled dollars from an old glass jar. A cup of bitter coffee and a piece of cherry pie, watching the magnificent and purple evening sky. The waitress gives a smile, asks me where I'm headed to. I tell her I'm just chasing down a different point of view. You rely upon the kindness of the folks you meet out here, leaving absolutely all the city paranoia and the fear. The slide guitars echoing right through the diner walls, answering the way the great American highway calls. Riding the wind across the great divide, taking the ultimate cross-country ride. Nothing but the asphalt and the burning sun, living on the move until the day is done. You know, tickets, no gates, just the open road, carrying the lightness of a traveler's load. I step back in the darkness, laying out the sleeping bag, right beneath the shadows of a Rocky Mountain crag. The stars are shining brighter than a diamond jewelry store, showing me what all is roaming and the walking is actually for. No sirens in the distance, no screaming in the night, just the quiet crickets in the pale moonlight. I close my eyes and listen to the rumble of the earth, understanding exactly what my peace of mind is worth. Tomorrow morning when the dew is resting on the grass, I'll be standing by the highway watching morning traffic pass, thumb pointed outward to the undiscovered west, putting nomadic spirit to the ultimate test. The journey is the destination, there is nowhere else to be, just a solitary wanderer, completely wild and free. Riding the wind across the great divide, taking the ultimate cross-country ride. Nothing but the asphalt and the burning sun, living on the move until the day is done. Yeah, no tickets, no gates, just the open road, carrying the lightness of a traveler's load. Yeah, keep the thumb out. The next ride might take you completely across the map, from the painted deserts to the coastal waves. You don't need $1 million to see the world. You just need a good pair of boots, a canvas bag, and a whole lot of faith in the road. Yeah. I remember the days when the pockets were completely filled with dust. Walking the freezing avenue with absolutely nothing but trust. The heavy metropolitan maze, completely designed to make you fare. Living entirely on the wrong side of the physical street scale. The winter winds blowing incredibly sharp, exactly like a knife. Trying to build a heavy masterpiece out of a fractured life. Me and Arch, I'm comic of navigating the dangerous concrete block, racing against the heavy, relentless hands of the analog clock. They threw the heavy bright patches directly across our path, testing our absolute resilience with the heavy neighborhood wrath. But we kept the heavy leather boots, moving strictly straight ahead, ignoring absolutely everything that the doubting spectator said. When the heavy physical burden was completely too much to bear, we split the heavy load entirely, without a single question there.
From the absolute deepest valleys to the highest cosmic peak,
we found the exact heavy language that the loyal brothers speak.
bleeding entirely through the heavy thorns, climbing up the steep incline.
Watching the absolute undeniable heavy constellation shine. Yeah, the street was completely dark, but the destination is bright.
Side by side,
Completely conquering
the heavy metropolitan night.
the physical scars, completely mapping out the heavy journey we took. A story absolutely entirely too massive for a single paper book. We step into the smoky hall to momentarily escape the pain, seeking the heavy physical shelter, completely out of the freezing rain. I watch him chalk up the heavy wooden cue with a steady hand. The absolute greatest undisputed shooter in this western lane, playing the heavy Russian pyramid on the massive green felt. The most entirely intense, absolute pressure that I ever felt. We calculating the geometry, breaking the heavy ivory sphere, making the absolute undeniable physical vision incredibly clear. A metaphor completely for exactly how we break through the absolute wall, answering the ultimate undeniable heavy universal call. Every single obstacle was entirely just a lesson in disguise, reflected completely exactly in the true brother's physical life.
From the absolute deepest valleys to the highest cosmic peak,
we found the exact heavy language at the loyal brothers speak,
leading entirely through the heavy thorns, climbing up the steep incline.
watching the absolute undeniable heavy constellation shine. Yeah, the street was completely dark, but the destination is bright.
Side by side,
Completely conquering
the heavy metropolitan night.
the gears, completely entirely turned exactly like a heavy stone wheel, changing the absolute reality of exactly how we physical feel. Traded the heavy worn out souls for the classic white wool ties, rising entirely completely straight out of the metropolitan fly. Cruising down the heavy boulevard with the absolute windows down, the undisputed heavy surviving champions of this western town. The deep move beats pumping strictly out of the heavy chrome trunk, baptized entirely completely by the absolute undeniable G-Funk. With the heavy paper never changed, the absolute foundation of the soul, we maintain the completely undeniable heavy brotherhood control.
When you walk entirely complete through the heavy fire with a friend, that is a heavy physical bond that the universe can never bend. The heavy stars are finally completed, strictly within our physical reach. The greatest absolute blessing that the heavy avenue could ever teach.
From the absolute deepest valleys to the highest cosmic peak,
we found the exact heavy language that the loyal brothers speak.
bleeding entirely through the heavy thorns, climbing up the steep incline.
Watching the absolute undeniable heavy constellation shine. Yeah, the street was completely dark, but the destination is bright.
Side by side,
Completely conquering.
the heavy metropolitan night.
We completely standing directly on the rooftop, looking at the grid. Proud of absolutely every single heavy physical thing we did. The heavy thorns completely rig your jackets and tore up our hands. But now we absolutely entirely, completely ruling these urban lands. Arcane Roman car, standing strictly, completely perfect by my side. Filled with the absolute undeniably heavy West Coast pride. The heavy soaring streams complete, pushing us directly into space. Finding the absolute undeniable heavy and permanent physical place. You absolutely cannot appreciate the heavy thrills of the light unless you entirely completely survive the terrifying dark night. The heavy blood, the absolute physical sweat, and the undeniable tears, washing away the completely entirely heavy accumulated fear. We build an absolute undeniable physical empire from the dirt, proving exactly what a heavy unbreakable loyalty completely works.
From the absolute deepest valleys to the highest cosmic peak.
We trading the heavy low rider steering wheels for the linoleum and the cardboard tonight. Hit the heavy plastic play button on the silver boombox. Listen to the analog tape hiss before the electro synth completely takes over. Let the move bass absolutely bounce. Step strictly inside the circle. Walking down the boulevard with the heavy corrugated brown sheet. Looking for the absolute perfect intersection where the street legends meet. Got 8 brand new heavy G-cell batteries sitting strictly in the bag, representing the physical neighborhood entirely without a single need to brag. We drop the heavy cardboard down, smoothing out the rough physical edges, building up a temporary absolute stage right beneath the concrete ledges. The crowd starts completely forming a circle, shoulder to physical shoulder. The undisputed heavy street culture constantly growing, entirely older. I push the heavy mechanical button down, strictly on the silver tape deck, making entirely sure the magnetic ribbon is completely, strictly in check. The deep G-funk bassline hit, strictly mixing with the electro wine. An absolute undeniable physical signal that everything is doing perfectly fine. Lacing up the thick white laces entirely on the heavy suede leather shoes. We entirely, completely leaving behind the heavy metropolitan blues. Spinning directly on the cardboard, define the physical ground, caught completely inside the heavy undeniable street sound. From the top, rock drops strictly to the heavy windmill spin. This is exactly where the absolute urban legends begin. Yeah, the avenue is watching underneath the fading light, holding down the heavy rhythm deep into the summer night. The absolute first kid steps directly into the exact center of the ring, letting the heavy rhythmic drum break absolutely, completely sing. He catches the undeniable physical beat entirely perfectly on the one, showing the younger generation exactly how the absolute top rock is done. Dropping down
out to the cardboard, sweeping the physical flow, giving the heavy watching crowd exactly what they completely gather for. The six-step moving incredibly smooth, a flawless physical glide, a pure undeniable manifestation of the West Coast neighborhood pride. He kicks his heavy legs entirely up, freezing strictly in a perfect stance, elevating the heavy street hustle into an absolute undeniable physical dance. The sneakers squeaking loud directly on the dusty brown corrugated box, defeating the relentless heavy ticking of the absolute analog clocks. You gotta completely feel the heavy rhythm directly, strictly in your chest, if you absolutely entirely ever wanna pass this heavy metropolitan test. Spin directly on the cardboard, define the physical ground, caught completely inside the heavy undeniable street sound. From the top, rock drop strictly to the heavy windmill spin. This is exactly where the absolute urban legends begin. Yeah, the avenue is watching underneath the fading light, holding down the heavy rhythm deep into the summer night. Arrival physical crew, completely strictly crosses from the other side of the street, looking to completely challenge an undeniable heavy physical beat. No heavy vocal words spoken, the entire absolute battle is strictly in the mood. A silent heavy conversation happening perfectly inside the undeniable groove. The challenger drops directly down, spinning entirely completely on his back, keeping his absolute physical balance undeniably completely exact. The heavy head's been entirely blurring his physical silhouette completely in the dark, leaving a massive heavy undeniable physical metropolitan cultural mark. The crowd completely roaring loud, entirely feeling the absolute heavy heat, the undisputed raw energy completely of the classic Californian street. I turn the heavy silver volume dial absolutely strictly to the maximum max, delivering the undeniable heavy instrumental absolute physical facts. It is a completely peaceful warfare, strictly fought on the corrugated square, breathing entirely completely in the absolute undeniable heavy authentic air. Spinning directly on the cardboard, define the physical ground, caught completely inside the heavy undeniable street sound. From the top, rock drop strictly to the heavy windmill spin. This is exactly where the absolute urban legends begin. Yeah, the avenue is watching underneath the faded light, holding down the heavy rhythm deep into the summer night. Yeah. The yellow street light, completely strictly buzzing right directly above our head, remembering exactly what the absolute older physical street legends entirely said. The cardboard is completely, entirely torn up, completely soft and incredibly weak, but it gave the heavy neighborhood an absolute perfect physical way to speak. The heavy sweat completely soaking, strictly entirely through the cotton shirts, ignoring exactly how much the heavy physical concrete entirely hurts.
The sun is completely gone, and the streetlights are painting the avenue orange. This is a 90s Slowed exclusive.
Tonight, we ain't talking about the hustle or the enemies.
We talking about the absolute foundation, the circle, the queen at the house. Listen to that muted trumpet crying in the background. Hear the heavy cue ball smack the rack. Let the hybrid bass walk, we keeping it completely real. I step inside the dim hall, smelling the heavy chalk and smoke, where the undeniable true words of the neighborhood is strictly spoke. I pull the custom wooden shaft right out of the leather case, taking my absolute proper position inside this physical space. My homie Artyom holding down the corner table in the back, waiting for me to completely shatter the heavy wooden rack. The sharp crack echoing exactly right over the drum kick, moving completely smooth, making the heavy atmosphere
atmosphere incredibly thick. These are the brothers who absolutely held me down through the rain, taking a massive share of the undeniable metropolitan pain. When the pockets were completely empty in the classic engine stall, these are the absolute first heavy numbers that I completely called. No fake handshakes, no temporary neighborhood smiles, just a heavy physical loyalty stretching for a million miles.
We holding down a heavy circle, keeping the perimeter tight,
navigating together
completely through the shadows of the night.
And when the heavy street business isn't
entirely exactly done,
I am driving completely straight back
to my absolute number one.
Yeah, the loyalty is the undeniable heavy blood
in the vein,
keeping the man entirely sane
inside the heavy pouring rain.
You gotta recognize exactly who is sitting at your physical table when the metropolitan environment becomes entirely unstable. A lot of cats strictly disappear when the heavy shadows fall, but the true physical brotherhood absolutely answers the late night call. We clinking the heavy glasses, celebrating the daily survival, completely ignoring the heavy threats of any physical rival. It is an undeniable chemistry built exactly on the pure respect, the absolute heavy outcome that the avenue absolutely didn't expect. But the analog clock on the wall is completely strictly ticking on, and the heavy midnight hours are absolutely entirely almost gone. I laid a heavy wooden cue directly down on the green felt, leaving the absolute undeniable heavy camaraderie that I felt. I got a completely different heavy destination strictly waiting for me, the absolute most beautiful physical reality that I could ever see.
We holding down a heavy circle, keeping the perimeter tight,
navigating together
completely through the shadows of the night.
And when the heavy street business isn't
entirely exactly done,
I'm driving completely straight back
to my absolute number one.
Yeah, the loyalty is the undeniable heavy blood
in the vein,
keeping the man entirely sane
inside the heavy pouring rain.
I push the heavy key strictly inside the front wooden door, leaving the heavy street dust completely on the porch floor. The undeniable chaos of the boulevard completely strictly fades away, erasing absolutely every single heavy problem of the passing day. She ain't the type to demand the heavy VIP section at the club, or completely chase the heavy flashing lights at the neighborhood pub. I find her sitting perfectly comfortable directly on the living room couch, the absolute heavy diamond for which my physical soul can strictly vouch. She got the heavy television glowing completely inside the dark room, chasing away the absolute undeniable heavy metropolitan gloom. The classic television series completely playing strictly on the screen, the most entirely peaceful heavy atmosphere that I have absolutely ever seen. I pulled a heavy cotton blanket entirely over both of our feet, finding the absolute undeniable paradise strictly right off the street.
We holding down a heavy circle, keeping the perimeter tight,
navigating together
completely through the shadows of the night.
And when the heavy street business isn't
entirely exactly done,
I'm driving completely straight back
to my absolute number one.
Yeah,
the loyalty is the undeniable heavy blood in the vein,
keeping the man entirely sane
inside the heavy pouring rain.
She completely understands the heavy silence without saying a word,
the absolute sweetest physical melody
that my heavy ears ever heard.
You realize
that all the heavy paper and the gold completely entirely mean nothing
if you ain't got the absolute undeniably
heavy real love and the trusting.
The muted trumpet strictly harmonizing completely with the slow breathing,
while the absolute
chaotic heavy city outside is completely seething.
We just watching the series,
completely lost strictly inside the plot,
knowing entirely that this heavy connection
is absolutely all that I got.
A man entirely needs the heavy brotherhood
to completely navigate the war.
We rolling strictly past the city limits, leaving all the noise behind, seeking the absolute perfect physical elevation of the human mind. The smell of the black coffee strictly pouring from the silver flask,
preparing my physical spirit completely for the ancient heavy task. The move bass riding smooth completely underneath the highway tires, escaping absolutely entirely from the heavy metropolitan fires. He keeps his heavy hands strictly perfectly on the steering wheel, showing me exactly how the undeniable physical piece is supposed to fulfill. Floating on the calm water underneath the heavy green pine, waiting for the perfect moment, strictly at the end of the line. The absolute heavy wisdom passing straight from the old to the youth, finding the undeniable, completely peaceful, quiet, physical truth. Yeah, the city is a hustle, but the deep lake is sitting perfectly still, learning how to navigate the absolute heavy, undeniable physical will. Yeah, we pull up to the dirt road, parking strictly by the heavy trees, smelling the fresh pine needles blowing entirely in the morning breeze. Walking strictly down the muddy bank, carrying the fiberglass, watching the absolute beautiful heavy morning hours completely pass. He shows me how to tie the heavy knot completely tight and incredibly strong, making entirely sure the physical presentation absolutely isn't wrong. I grip the cork handle, pulling the heavy metal bell strictly back, preparing for the absolute undeniable physical underwater attack. Sending the silver spinner flying on a completely flawless air trail, knowing that this heavy generational connection will absolutely never fail. The mechanical clicking ringing strictly inside the silent, freezing air, leaving absolutely every heavy neighborhood worry completely right there. The thick mist is slowly rising directly off the freezing liquid glass, a heavy undeniable masterpiece that absolutely nothing can ever surpass. Floating on the calm water underneath the heavy green pine, waiting for the perfect moment, strictly at the end of the line. The absolute heavy wisdom passing straight from the old to the youth, finding the undeniable, completely peaceful, quiet, physical truth. Yeah, the city is a hustle, but the deep lake is sitting perfectly still, learning how to navigate the absolute heavy, undeniable physical will. Sitting strictly on the green cooler, watching the red bobber flow, the absolute heaviest piece that a young physical man ever wrote. He doesn't say a heavy word, he just watches the deep dark blue, teaching me exactly what the patient physical man is strictly supposed to do. Suddenly the heavy water ripples, the fiberglass completely begins to bend, the quiet meditation coming strictly to an absolute sudden heavy end. He tells me keep the heavy rod tip pointing strictly straight into the sky, don't let the undeniable heavy tension completely pass you entirely by. I am reeling strictly with the steady, heavy, and completely determined pace, a completely undeniably massive smile breaking strictly on my physical face. The silver fighter completely breaches strictly through the water foam, right here in the heavy wilderness, feeling completely perfectly at home. We pull the heavy catch completely strictly up onto the muddy shore, exactly what we drove into this heavy quiet wilderness completely for. Floating on the calm water underneath the heavy green pine, waiting for the perfect moment, strictly at the end of the line. The absolute heavy wisdom passing straight from the old to the youth, finding the undeniable, completely peaceful, quiet, physical truth. Yeah, the city is a hustle, but the deep lake is sitting perfectly still, learning how to navigate the absolute heavy, undeniable physical will. The golden sun is strictly burning completely through the morning gray, stripping the absolute heavy shadows of the dawn completely entirely away. We pack the heavy wet gear directly back into the canvas bag, watching the majestic physical flight of the undeniable heavy mountain stag. The drive back to the physical concrete is incredibly slow and calm, holding the heavy undeniable memory strictly completely in my palm. It wasn't just about the heavy fish that we completely managed to catch, it was the undeniable heavy bonding that absolutely nothing can ever match. The classic heavy G-funk rhythm strictly carrying us completely down the road, carrying the absolute heaviest and most undeniably beautiful family low. I
look strictly over at the old man, completely filled with the absolute respect, the absolute heavy foundation that my physical life will strictly always reflect. He smiles and turns the heavy radio strictly up just a little bit more, cruising completely perfectly back to the undeniable heavy metropolitan door. Floating on the calm water underneath the heavy green pine, waiting for the perfect moment, strictly at the end of the line. We rolling strictly past the city limits, leaving all the noise behind. Seeking the absolute perfect physical elevation at the human mind. The smell of the black coffee strictly pouring from the silver flask, preparing my physical spirit completely for the ancient heavy task. The mood bass riding smooth completely underneath the highway tires, escaping absolutely entirely from the heavy metropolitan fires. He keeps his heavy hand strictly perfectly on the steering wheel, showing me exactly how the undeniable physical peace is supposed to feel. Floating on the calm water underneath the heavy green pine, waiting for the perfect moment, strictly at the end of the line. The absolute heavy wisdom passing straight from the old to the youth, finding the undeniable, completely peaceful, quiet, physical truth. Yeah, the city is a hustle, but the deep lake is sitting perfectly still, learning how to navigate the absolute heavy, undeniable physical will. We pull up to the dirt road, parking strictly by the heavy trees, smelling the fresh pine needles, blowing entirely in the morning breeze. Walking strictly down the muddy bank, carrying the fiberglass, watching the absolute beautiful heavy morning hours completely pass. He shows me how to tie the heavy knot completely tight and incredibly strong, making entirely sure the physical presently from the heavy metropolitan fires. He keeps his heavy hand strictly perfectly on the steering wheel, showing me exactly how the undeniable physical peace is supposed to feel. Floating on the calm water underneath the heavy green pine, waiting for the perfect moment, strictly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's go. Yeah. Walking down the sun-baked avenue, breathing the afternoon breeze, watching the real royalty, putting the chaotic neighborhood at ease. It ain't about the heavy gold chains or the violent street pride. It's about the phenomenal women keeping the community alive inside. Look at the matriarch standing strong exactly on the wooden porch step, commanding the absolute highest level of the metropolitan rep. She spent her entire physical life shielding us strictly from the heavy rain, absorbing every single drop of the undeniable neighborhood pain.
I remember sitting at the kitchen table feeling completely physically beat, and the absolute queen bringing a warm plate of food for her son to eat.
A quiet, heavy sacrifice that the busy avenue absolutely rarely sees.
The invisible heavy crown bringing the strongest hustlers to their knees.
You absolutely gotta bow your head when she walks entirely, completely past.
The only pure and heavy love
that is permanently built to last.
Raise your heavy glass,
completely up to the queens of the block.
The absolute solid foundation underneath the neighborhood rock.
From the front porch steps
strictly to the living room throne,
the most undeniable heavy royalty
that the avenue has ever known.
Yeah, we giving up the absolute highest level of the street respect,
protecting the beautiful physical crown
that the universe
directs.
You see them stepping out the door looking absolutely flawlessly sharp, a beautiful melody playing completely on an invisible physical heart.
The rhythmic heavy click of the heels exactly on the gray concrete floor, demanding the absolute respect before they even walk walk through the door.
The young street cat strictly completely trying to spit their weak game.
But the queen absolutely refuses to ever compromise a heavy name.
She carries the weight of the universe directly on her physical back,
Keeping the undeniable, chaotic metropolitan reality strictly on track.
She ain't looking for a heavy savior to completely pay your daily bills, navigating completely effortlessly over these heavy physical hills.
You gotta step correct, adjust your collar, and strictly mind your speech, because these phenomenal women have an absolute heavy lesson to teach.
The velvet roads piano completely, strictly echoing her absolute grace.
A heavy, undisputed masterpiece,
Entirely in this physical urban space.
Oh, raise your heavy glass
Completely up
to the queens of the block,
the absolute
solid foundation underneath the neighborhood rock.
from the front porch steps
To the living room throne
the most undeniable heavy royalty.
that the avenue has ever known.
Yeah, we giving up the absolute highest level
Of the street respect, protecting the beautiful physical crown.
of the universe.
Direct.
When the heavy street lights completely turn the physical sky to a dark blue.
I am taking my absolute heavy devotion completely straight back to you.
She absolutely doesn't need to be seen in a heavy crowded nightclub, but chasing a loud physical validation at the local neighborhood pub.
My absolute queen is completely comfortable strictly inside our own zones,
Sitting beautifully on the fabric couch,
which is her undeniable throne.
watching the favorite television series completely exactly in the quiet light.
Making the entirely heavy metropolitan chaos
Feel absolutely perfectly right. I dropped the heavy classic car keys strictly,
strictly onto the wooden glass table.
knowing exactly that her undeniable love.
Is entirely completely stable.
You don't need to absolutely flash the heavy paper to make her physically smile.
She appreciates the absolute quiet devotion.
And the classic West Coast style,
That is the absolute real pride.
hiding completely behind the locked door.
Exactly what every single heavy street hustler
Should be fighting for.
raise a heavy glass
Completely up
to the queens of the block, the absolute solid foundation underneath the neighborhood rock. From the front porch steps strictly to the living room throne,
the most undeniable heavy royalty.
that the avenue has ever known.
Yeah, we giving up the absolute highest level
Of the street respect, protecting the beautiful physical crown.
of the universe.
Direct.
I put a younger generation completely directly strictly to the side,
Teaching them exactly how to navigate the absolute heavy neighborhood ride.
You never absolutely ever completely raise your physical voice to a queen.
The most entirely undeniable
Heavy disrespect
that the avenue has seen.
You open the heavy wooden door,
And you absolutely let her walk through first.
quenching the absolute undeniable heavy
Metropolitan respect first.
the deep mode bass,
Completely laying down the undeniable physical law.
creating the most beautiful heavy.
Harmonious picture that you ever saw.
The physical neighborhood
Is entirely exactly built strictly upon their grace, holding completely together
absolutely.
every single corner of this place.
Yeah. I take a slow walk strictly down the familiar neighborhood block, listening to the steady rhythm of the heavy analog clock. They knocked down the old diner, built a massive heavy high-rise, putting a completely different picture right in front of my physical eyes. The homies I used to know were wearing completely different gear, trying to perfectly blend entirely into the heavy atmospheric fear. Chasing every single heavy trend that the metropolitan wind blows, changing up their entire rhythm, strictly just to match the new clothes. But I am wearing the exact same heavy canvas jacket I always had, refusing to completely lose my mind over a temporary street fad. You look around and see the heavy foundations entirely shifting fast, but I am strictly built completely from the heavy, undeniable physical past. It is a heavy temptation to entirely strictly switch up your chosen lane, but keeping your true physical soul is the absolute ultimate game. The world is spinning fast, the seasons completely turn around, entirely planted on the ground. The colors fade away, the heavy city changes its entire face. But I am holding my original, undeniable, heavy physical space. Yeah, the winds of change are blowing, entirely cold and severe. But exactly who I am is absolutely remaining strictly here. I see the cats on the corner completely, strictly altering their voice, making a completely, undeniably heavy physical, artificial choice. They wanna fit perfectly, entirely into the new metropolitan mode, trading the absolute heavy, genuine truth for a piece of fool's gold. They tell me I gotta update my heavy physical, undeniable style. But I just look at them strictly with a heavy, and know and smile. Because the trend's absolutely, completely run entirely out of gas. For the absolute heavy, authentic physical legends completely past. The test of the heavy time entirely, strictly exposes the fake, showing exactly what kind of heavy physical foundation they really make. I keep my heavy circle tight, walking strictly at my own pace, protecting the absolute heavy integrity entirely of my physical space. You can paint the heavy brick wall entirely, completely fresh and new, but the heavy solid core underneath has to entirely, strictly remain true. The world is spinning fast, the seasons completely turn around, but I am keeping my heavy boots entirely planted on the ground. The colors fade away, the heavy city changes its entire face, but I am holding my original, undeniable, heavy physical space. Yeah, the winds of change are blowing, entirely cold and severe. But exactly who I am is absolutely remaining strictly here. I sit entirely, completely alone underneath the heavy evening sky, watching the heavy, undisputed physical decades strictly flying by. It takes a heavy amount of absolute courage to entirely stay the same, when the entire metropolitan universe is playing a completely different game. You gotta look directly into the heavy physical mirror every single night and make entirely sure your absolute heavy soul is doing completely right. The heavy pressure is a physical ocean trying entirely to pull you under, drowning out your original voice exactly with the massive physical thunder. But I am anchoring my heavy roots entirely deep into the heavy dirt, wearing my absolute undisputed heavy physical morals exactly like a shirt. Let the heavy neighborhood entirely, completely, strictly rearrange. I'm the absolute, undeniable, heavy constant entirely inside the change. The smooth electric guitar, strictly crying entirely in the background, matching the absolute, undeniably heavy, original, authentic street sound. The world is spinning fast, the seasons completely turn around, but I am keeping my heavy boots entirely planted on the ground. The colors fade away, the heavy city changes its entire face, but I am holding my original, undeniable, heavy physical space. Yeah, the winds of change are blowing, entirely cold and severe, but exactly who I am is absolutely remaining strictly here. The heavy sun is coming strictly up, completely, entirely over the hill, and I am absolutely, entirely, completely standing strictly physically still. The heavy masquerade completely, strictly falls apart in the morning light, showing exactly who entirely, completely survived the heavy physical night. The heavy chameleons completely, strictly, entirely losing their physical weight, forgetting exactly who they absolutely were strictly just the other day. But the heavy respect entirely, completely, strictly belongs to the rare few who absolutely, completely, exactly, strictly, entirely remained exactly true. I am keeping the heavy, undeniably physical, original West Coast state of mind, leaving the heavy physical, undeniable metropolitan illusions far behind. So let the heavy calendar completely, strictly, entirely turn the heavy page. I am exactly the entirely, completely same man inside this golden age. Still, time keeps strictly moving. Time keeps strictly moving. Yeah. Sitting completely alone inside the silent physical room tonight. Putting the absolute heavy thoughts completely strictly into the light. Wonder exactly where this physical journey is entirely gonna go. And if we ever manage to take it completely strictly nice and slow, I seal this envelope strictly entirely for the older version of me, hoping you kept the physical vision entirely clear for the world to see. Did you finally park that heavy black Tahoe strictly on the block? Over classic Chevy Impala rolling completely entirely round the clock. I hope you still pushing that 90s slowed heavy musical sound, keeping the authentic 90s hip-hop entirely strictly underground. The heavy ink is bleeding strictly directly through the yellow page, writing exactly from the middle of the absolute undeniable golden age. I hope the physical passion never faded completely entirely away, and you still strictly regulating the heavy rhythm every single day. Time keeps strictly moving, the heavy clock keeps ticking on. Before you even blink, the absolute heavy physical years are gone. I am sending this message across the undeniable heavy distant miles, hoping you still keeping the heavy authentic West Coast smiles. Read these heavy words entirely, completely written in the dark, and never lose the undeniable heavy physical original street spark. I wonder if the heavy metropolitan struggle entirely took a toll, or if you managed to completely strictly protect the physical soul. You gotta keep your energy strictly grounded entirely to the core, protecting the heavy relay so you can completely entirely ask for more. Did you ever make that heavy trip entirely exactly across the sea to watch the Barcelona legends playing absolutely entirely free? It is the heavy dreams that keep the physical engine running tight, navigating entirely, completely, strictly through the absolute darkest night. I hope you never traded the heavy moral strictly for the fast cash, or let the undeniable heavy physical empire completely, entirely crash. I am writing these heavy letters strictly with a completely steady hand, hoping you built the heavy sanctuary completely, exactly in this land. The paper is absorbing the absolute undeniable heavy physical truth, a massive permanent monument entirely strictly to the original you. Time keeps strictly moving. Time keeps strictly moving. Time keeps strictly moving. The heavy clock keeps ticking on. Before you even blink, the absolute heavy physical years are gone. I'm sending this message across the undeniable heavy distant miles, hoping you still keeping the heavy authentic West Coast smile. Read these heavy words entirely, completely written in the dark, and never lose the undeniable heavy physical original street spark. I hope you're still keeping the heavy physical circle entirely tight, and taking care of the family, strictly doing absolutely everything right. Remember the heavy drives entirely, completely, exactly with the old man, learning exactly how to completely, entirely execute the master plan. And the heavy warm meals entirely waiting strictly, completely on the stove. The absolute heaviest foundation inside the physical treasure code. Don't ever let the heavy calendar make you entirely, strictly forget the absolute heaviest physical decks that you completely, entirely met. The acoustic guitar picking entirely, completely in the background noise, reminding you to keep the absolute heavy metropolitan physical poise. I lick the heavy envelope, sealing the absolute physical undeniable deal, exactly how the undeniable heavy original street legends completely feel. We strictly planting the heavy seeds, completely in the physical ground, waiting entirely, completely, strictly for the heavy harvest to be found. Time keeps strictly moving. Time keeps strictly moving. The heavy clock, the clock keeps strictly moving. The wax seal is entirely, completely pressed into the heavy folded paper. The heavy physical story, completely catching the absolute midnight vapor. Whenever you open this, whether you are entirely 50 or completely gray, I hope you are absolutely, completely, strictly, entirely doing okay. I hope the heavy G-funk bass is still strictly playing in the ride, and you entirely, completely keeping the absolute heavy West Coast ride. The heavy grandfather clock strictly strikes the absolute midnight hour, even the absolute physical rule.
Yeah. Step past the massive stone arch. Lead a loud avenue completely behind you for a minute. Welcome to the southwest corner of the park, where the real heavy battles happen right on a concrete table. 64 squares, black and white wooden soldiers. Listen to the heavy mechanical timer ticking. A completely silent war of the mind. Let that deep bass roll right under the autumn trees. Make your first move. Walking through the village, feeling the heavy autumn breeze, hearing the rustle of the drying yellow falling leaves. I make my way directly down to the legendary square, looking for a mental challenge waiting for me completely there. Find an empty stool right across from a veteran player, an absolute master, a true Washington Square mayor. He sets the wooden pieces strictly on the marble grid, looking at me like I'm just another foolish physical kid. I drop a heavy crumpled 20 right on the stone surface, showing the old man that I have a serious absolute purpose. He hits the analog timer, the physical ticker starts, a silent war of the minds and heavy beating street hearts. No physical violence, just absolute mental strategy, trying to completely avoid an undeniable king's tragedy.
Sitting on the concrete under the city trees, playing the silent game, catching the autumn breeze.
The black and white squares, holding the master plan,
proving exactly who is the ultimate better man.
Yeah, the clock is running out. The pressure is so heavy, keeping the mind completely focused and entirely steady. I pushed upon the E4, claiming the center space. He answers right back with an absolute perfect poker face, developing the nice, protecting the heavy physical flanks, moving the wooden cavalry completely across the ranks. The old man smiles, taking a sip of his black coffee, trying to make my entire defense look completely sloppy. A couple pigeons walking strictly around the table legs, while I am calculating exactly where the master begs. I hear a distant acoustic guitar playing a gentle chord, while my entire universe shrinks down to this wooden board. He slides his bishop aggressively across the diagonal line, but I already saw the trap and my position is absolutely fine. I castle to the king's side, putting the monarch safely away, preparing for the absolute roughest part of the physical day.
Sitting on the concrete under the city trees, playing the silent game, catching the autumn breeze.
The black and white squares, holding the master plan,
proving exactly who is the ultimate better man.
Yeah, the clock is running out. The pressure is so heavy, keeping the mind completely focused and entirely steady. The middle game is entirely a heavy tangle mess, an undeniable masterpiece of the physical street chess. A small crowd gathering strictly behind my back, watching a veteran launch a heavy kingside attack. He slams the pieces down, trying to strictly intimidate the mind, but I'm leaving his absolute basic tactics completely behind. I sacrifice a heavy rook entirely for the greater good, controlling the center of the board exactly like I should. The crowd inside a heavy gas, thinking I made a mistake, but they don't see the heavy physical toll it's gonna take. The analog timer ticking down to the absolute final minute, the undisputed heavy mental championship, and I am in it.
He takes the bait and captures my piece with a greedy hand, falling completely perfectly into the heavy trap that I planned.
Sitting on the concrete under the city trees, playing the silent game, catching the autumn breeze.
The black and white squares, holding the master plan,
Proving exactly who is the ultimate better man.
yeah, the clock is running out. The pressure is so heavy, keeping the mind completely focused and entirely steady. I slide a queen directly up the absolute central file, wiping away the veterans' undeniable confident smile. The white knight jumps perfectly, strictly to the final square, trapping the black king completely without a breath of air. I hit the heavy button on the wooden ticking clock, sending an absolute undeniable physical metropolitan shock. Checkmate on the concrete. The heavy battle is completely done. The quiet afternoon victory is absolutely strictly won. The old man nods his head, showing the heavy street respect for all his mental outcome that he absolutely didn't expect. He pushes the crumpled 20 directly across the cold stone. The undisputed heavyweight champion holding the park throne. To shake his callous hand, he set the pieces on the board. The greatest silent victory that I've ever physically scored.
Yeah. So why I'm keeping the concrete teaches you exactly. Yeah. Walking out the heavy double doors with a backpack full of weight. Looking at the neighborhood, trying to navigate my physical fate. I see the homies posted strictly by the corner liquor store, holding folded paper money, always hunting down a little mall. They got the graduation rings from the unforgiving street, memorizing every single crack completely underneath their feet. They look at my heavy textbooks and they hit me with a smile, saying that the classroom hustle absolutely ain't the proper style. But I am looking at the long game, strictly past the physical block, reading the philosophy entirely against the metropolitan clock. The pavement gives you reflexes, teaches you to watch your back, but the paper pages show you how to build the absolute heavy track. I grip the canvas strap completely tight across my physical chest, preparing my own mind to pass the absolute ultimate test. The concrete teaches you exactly how to survive the night, keeping your vision focused strictly in the fading light. But the heavy books give you the keys to entirely own the land, building a massive physical empire completely out of the sand. Yeah, you absolutely need the balance of the paper and the stone if you wanna sit entirely comfortable on the metropolitan throne. The corner got us on professors preaching strictly in the dark, teaching heavy physical lessons strictly in the neighborhood park. The tuition is incredibly high, paid entirely in the blood and sweat. A heavy undeniable syllabus that you absolutely never forget. You learn exactly how to read a physical face from a mile away, knowing exactly what the heavy street predators are about to say. But I sit inside the silent library underneath the yellow beam, gathering the mathematics to construct a massive physical dream. They study in the local block, I'm studying the entire globe, wrapping my physical mind completely inside an intellectual role. The street gives you the immediate physical undeniable cash in hand, but the education teaches you exactly how the economics expand. I watch the older street legends entirely completely fading away, because they never learn exactly how the absolute heavy rules play. The concrete teaches you exactly how to survive the night, keeping your vision focused strictly in the fading light. But the heavy books give you the keys to entirely own the land, building a massive physical empire completely out of the sand.
Yeah, you absolutely need the balance of the paper and the stone if you wanna sit entirely comfortable
on the metropolitan throne.
A couple years, completely passing exactly like a shadow on the wall. Watching the heavy physical autumn leaves entirely strictly fall. I walk the same exact avenue, holding a heavy road degree, looking at the absolute heavy reality of exactly what I see. The same homie strictly standing entirely on the exact same corner square, trapped completely inside the heavy physical undisputed street snare. The fast money completely vanished, leaving strictly nothing behind, because they never took the physical time to strictly elevate the mind. I shake their hand, showing the absolute undeniable heavy respect, but realizing the heavy physical outcome that they didn't expect. The street smarts completely kept them entirely breathing in the light, but the lack of the heavy paper strictly stopped them in the drive. You gotta read the fine print, completely hidden inside the contract, or the metropolitan predators will absolutely leave you completely hijacked.
The concrete teaches you exactly how to survive the night, keeping your vision focused strictly in the fading light.
But the heavy books give you the keys to entirely own the land, building a massive physical empire
completely out of the sand.
Yeah, you absolutely need the balance of the paper
and the stone
if you wanna sit entirely comfortable
on the metropolitan throne.
So I am keeping the absolute balance entirely strictly in my head, remembering exactly everything the street in the classroom said. If you only got the heavy books, the avenue will eat you raw. You absolutely gotta completely understand the heavy physical street law. But if you only got the pavement, you will never truly rise above, trapped entirely inside the neighborhood that you absolutely love. You merge the heavy vocabulary completely with the physical street slang, avoiding every single heavy trap that the metropolitan system brings. I put the diploma completely strictly right next to the survival skills, conquering the absolute heavy, undeniably physical metropolitan hills. A masterpiece of the street knowledge, completely fused with the pen, creating the absolute highest caliber of the physical street man. The move baseline bouncing completely entirely with the heavy page, the undeniable absolute heavy truth of this golden physical age.
The concrete teaches you exactly how to survive the night, keeping your vision focused strictly in the fading light. The concrete teaches you
walking out the heavy double doors with a backpack full of weight, looking at the neighborhood, trying to navigate my physical fame. I see the homies posted strictly by the corner liquor store, holding folded paper money, always hunting down a little more. They got the graduation rings from the unforgiving street, memorizing every single crack completely underneath the feet. They look at my heavy textbooks and they hit me with a smile, saying the classroom hustle absolutely ain't the proper style. But I am looking at the long game, strictly past the physical black, reading the philosophy entirely against the metropolitan clock. The pavement gives you reflexes, teaches you to watch your back, but the paper pages show you how to build the absolute heavy track. I grip the canvas strap completely tight across my physical chest, preparing my own mind to pass the absolute ultimate test. The concrete teaches you exactly how to survive the night, keeping your vision focused strictly in the fading light. But the heavy books give you the keys to entirely own the land, building a massive physical empire completely out of the sand. Yeah, you absolutely need the balance of the paper and the stone if you want to sit entirely comfortable on the metropolitan throne. The corner got its own professors, preaching strictly in the dark, teaching heavy physical lessons strictly in the neighborhood park. The tuition is incredibly high. Yeah.
10 stories of absolute physical history standing strictly on the corner. You can hear the heavy iron pipes rattling completely behind the plaster. Generations of footsteps worn directly into the concrete stairs. Let the heavy bass rumble entirely through the floorboards. Listen to the building breathe. Standing on the pavement looking up at the massive heavy wall. A red brick giant answering the absolute undeniable urban call. The mortar is cracking, showing the heavy passage of the years, soaking up a million physical laughs and a million heavy tears. The foundation poured completely thick before we were even born, weathering every single heavy, undeniably physical winter storm. I touched the rough surface strictly with my bare physical hand. The absolute heaviest undisputed structure in this concrete land. The brass numbers on the heavy wooden front door completely faded, while the neighborhood around it got completely undeniably traded. But the heavy architecture stays completely strictly standing tall, holding the absolute heavy secrets directly inside the plastered wall. You feel the heavy vibration completely exactly when the boiler kicks, the undeniable heavy heartbeat of a million stacked red bricks. These heavy red walls are holding the absolute truth inside a massive brick monument where the physical city secrets hide. The iron fire escapes, rattling in the heavy evening breeze, standing completely unbroken with the absolute maximum ease. Yeah, the neighborhood shifts, but the foundation holds its ground, listening strictly to the rhythm of the heavy metropolitan sound. Yeah, push the heavy wooden door, step strictly into the main hall. The echo bouncing entirely, completely directly off the tiled wall. No heavy elevators, just the physical, absolute marble flight, climbing up the heavy staircase deep into the physical night. You hear the heavy radiator strictly hissing on the second floor. A heavy physical argument completely bleeding through a heavy door. The smell of old wood and the heavy undeniable cooked meals. That is exactly how this physical brick giant completely, strictly feels. The iron fire escape, strictly clinging to the absolute backside, where the undisputed heavy street legends completely used to hide. A heavy maze of the physical hallways in the narrow physical rooms, where the absolute heavy metropolitan flower completely entirely blooms. The dust dancing strictly in the heavy physical shafts of light, maintaining the absolute maximum heavy undisputed physical might. These heavy red walls are holding the absolute truth inside a massive brick monument where the physical city secrets hide. The iron fire escapes are rattling in the heavy evening breeze, standing completely unbroken with the absolute maximum ease. Yeah, the neighborhood shifts, but the foundation holds its ground, listening strictly to the rhythm of the heavy metropolitan sound. The heavy wind howling exactly through the narrow physical alleyway, washing the absolute heavy metropolitan physical dust completely away. I walk the heavy corridor, looking at the peeling yellow paint, a heavy physical environment for the center and the urban saint. The deep moon bass completely bouncing entirely off the courtyard brick. The atmosphere inside this heavy monument is undeniably thick. You see the heavy names carved completely strictly in the windowsill, proving that this heavy red structure is completely entirely standing still. The copper pipes completely entirely strictly running through the heavy vein, pumping the heavy physical heat to block the undeniable heavy pain. It is a heavy living organism, completely strictly made of clay and stone, making sure the heavy metropolitan residents are never completely alone. A testament completely strictly to the heavy physical builder's hands, the undisputed heavy king of these physical heavy concrete lands. These heavy red walls are holding the absolute truth inside a massive brick monument where the physical city secrets hide. The iron fire escapes are rattling in the heavy evening breeze, standing completely unbroken with the absolute maximum ease. Yeah, the neighborhood shifts, but the foundation holds its ground, listening strictly to the rhythm of the heavy metropolitan sound. I push the heavy metal hatch directly to the absolute heavy roof, looking for the undeniable absolute heavy metropolitan proof. The black tar completely sticking exactly to the bottom of the shoe, taking in the absolute maximum undeniable heavy physical view. The heavy brick chimney completely standing strictly right against the sky, watching the heavy physical decades absolutely completely flying by. This heavy red building is an absolute undisputed heavy street king, dictating exactly how the heavy metropolitan physical voices sing. The heavy architecture entirely strictly outlasting the physical flesh, keeping the absolute undeniable heavy metropolitan memories completely fresh. Yeah. 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 Love.
Walking up Lenox Avenue with the leather boots laced tight, absorbing the history, glowing in the physical street light. The architecture holding the century of the urban pain, while the rhythm of the ancestors flows completely through the vein. You look at the corners and see the shadows of the past, a golden era of the art that was strictly built to last. Yeah, the heavy poets and the jazzmen carving out a legendary name, setting the entire metropolitan universe in a cultural flame. I touch the cold iron railing of a classic brownstone stoop, hearing the distant echo of a legendary rhythm group. The ballrooms and the speakeasies faded into the gray, but the undeniable spirit strictly never went away. The foundation was poured by the absolute uptown kings, dictating exactly how the heavy metropolitan chorus sings. There is a heavy magic buried deep inside the Harlem stone, a physical rhythm that the avenue completely calls its own. Yeah, from the ancient jazz clubs down to the modern city street, the undeniable heart of the borough, strictly skipping a beat. Yeah, the crown is heavy, but the neighborhood wears it proud, standing absolutely tall inside the massive metropolitan crowd. Yeah, moving smoothly strictly down that heavy block of 125, the absolute physical center, keeping the entire culture alive. The vendors pushing the wooden cart strictly on the curb, a beautiful heavy chaos that nobody can entirely disturb. The smell of the roasted nuts completely mixing with the exhaust, the heavy physical territory where the absolute weak get lost. I watch the street hustlers maneuvering through the thick crowd, speaking the heavy metropolitan language undeniably loud. The fashion is a statement completely written in the cloth, drawn to the neon lights exactly like an ancient moth. The heavy canvas of the absolute undisputed northern pride, where the absolute heavy legends of the neighborhood strictly ride. The bass line completely bouncing off the storefront glass, watching the heavy hours of the physical afternoon strictly pass. There is a heavy magic buried deep inside the Harlem stone, a physical rhythm that the avenue completely calls its own. From the ancient jazz clubs down to the modern city street, the undeniable heart of the borough, strictly skipping the beat. Yeah, the crown is heavy, but the neighborhood wears it proud, standing absolutely tall inside the massive metropolitan crowd. I stand entirely, completely, strictly under the Apollo marquee, the absolute heavy proving ground for the entire physical city. You gotta rub the wooden tree of hope strictly for the luck before the heavy physical reality leaves you completely stuck. The musical legends absolutely bled on that legendary stage, writing the absolute heaviest undeniable historical page. The crowd is absolutely completely strictly unforgiving and raw, the absolute heavy physical undeniable entertainment law. I hear a heavy vocal harmony bleeding right through the back door, leaving the heavy physical audience completely begging for more. The heavy torches pass strictly down from the old to the youth, speaking the absolute heavy undeniable physical street truth. The vintage saxophone completely strictly weeping in the cold air. A historical masterpiece entirely, completely, strictly there. There is a heavy magic buried deep inside the Harlem stone, a physical rhythm that the avenue completely calls its own. From the ancient jazz clubs down to the modern city street, the undeniable heart of the borough, strictly skipping a beat. Yeah, the crown is heavy, but the neighborhood wears it proud, standing absolutely tall inside the massive metropolitan crowd. The sun is finally dipping strictly behind the brick line. That heavy Harlem evening absolutely feeling completely divine. The corner bodega's glowing completely strictly in the dark night, providing the absolute undisputed physical street light. The heavy boombox is strictly carrying the absolute new sound, but the ancient rhythm completely entirely stays underground. We walking completely exactly where the giants used to stand, the absolute heavy royalty of this undeniable physical land. The mood synthesized entirely perfectly, strictly hits the note inside the deep pocket of the undeniable winter coat. The history in the present completely strictly intertwined, exactly like a heavy physical, undeniably ancient vine. The absolute heavy magic of the neighborhood completely survives, dictating the absolute heavy rhythm of the metropolitan lives. There is a heavy magic buried deep inside the Harlem stone, physical rhythm that the avenue really calls its own. From the ancient jazz club down to the modern city street, the undeniable heart of the borough, strictly skipping a beat.
Yeah, the crown is heavy,
but the neighborhood wears it proud.
standing absolutely tall.
Inside the massive metropolitan crowd.
Yeah, leave the noise on the pavement. Push those heavy oak doors wide open. Step into the sanctuary. No sirens in here, no screeching tires. Just the quiet hum of the ceiling fan and the smell of ancient paper. This is a 90s slow production, dedicated to the architects of words. Find your favorite aisle. Let the Rhodes piano completely set the mood. Listen to the silence. The concrete jungle is loud, the avenue is a mess. I'm stepping off the block to strictly decompress. Walking up the marble steps of the public domain, seeking a little shelter from the metropolitan rain. Pushing through the heavy doors, leaving the chaos behind. Entering the absolute greatest gymnasium for the mind. The air is feeling thick with the scent of polished wood. A different kind of hustle that is perfectly understood. I take a slow walk strictly down the central hall, looking at the massive portraits hanging right on the wall. Got the Walkman clipped tight right onto the belt. The most profound physical silence that I ever felt. I find an empty heavy table sitting in the back right, getting ready to strictly elevate my mental sight. Lost inside the aisles, underneath the yellow light. Turning heavy pages deep into the quiet night. Building up the vision, catching inspiration spark. Gathering the ancient wisdom hidden in the dark. Yeah, the streets are always rushing, moving way too fast, but I am finding absolute peace inside the heavy pack. I leave the heavy canvas bag resting right on the chair, walking through the towering shelves without a physical care. Running my fingertips strictly over the leather spines, looking for the classic rhythms and the original lines. Every single dusty volume holding a heavy soul, taking my imagination entirely under control. I pull a massive encyclopedia right off the wooden rack, carrying the heavy knowledge completely straight on my back. Searching for the perfect concepts for the physical script, making sure the mental arsenal is fully equipped. It ain't about the street corners or the heavy chrome wheels. It's strictly about exactly how the deep vocabulary feels. I drop the heavy hardcover directly onto the desk, preparing to strictly conquer this intellectual quest. Inside the aisles, underneath the yellow light, turning heavy pages deep into the quiet night. Building up the vision, catching inspiration spark. Gathering the ancient wisdom hidden in the dark. Yeah, the streets are always rushing, moving way too fast, but I am finding absolute peace inside the head. I flip the green glass switch strictly on the reading lamp, representing for the quiet intellectual camp. Pull out a yellow paper pad and a heavy ink pen, ready to strictly break the boundaries of the physical zen. The G-funk bass, I'm softly bleeding through the foam. Headphones mixing with the quiet whispers in the library tones. I hear the heavy paper turning from a table away. A community of thinkers making the absolute most of the day. I write a heavy paragraph, crossing out a couple words, flying over the philosophy exactly like a flock of birds. This is where the true foundation of the project is laid. This is exactly how the absolute heavy legends are made. We digging through the archives, finding the hidden gold, the greatest metropolitan stories that were ever told. Lost inside the aisles, underneath the yellow light. Turning heavy pages deep into the quiet night. Building up the vision, catching inspiration spark. Gathering the ancient wisdom hidden in the dark. Yeah, the streets are always rushing, moving way too fast, but I am finding absolute peace inside the heavy past. Yeah, the grandfather clock strictly chiming at the top of the hour, reminding everybody of the absolute heavy mental power. The sunlight fading out exactly through the stained glass, watching another beautiful physical afternoon completely pass. I close the heavy cover, let out a satisfied sigh, watching the tiny dust particles floating up to the sky. The heavy script is finally finished, written strictly by hand, ready to entirely conquer this massive physical land. I pack the yellow paper bag directly into the bag, making sure my mental energy will absolutely never lag. I nod to the librarian sitting behind the main desk, concluding the absolute greatest undeniable quest. Stepping back out directly into the fading evening light, carrying the heavy inspiration deep into the night. Yeah, oh yeah, you absolutely gotta feed the mind. You can't just hustle on the physical corner. You gotta read the heavy chapters, gather the words, build the script. Looking back at the calendar, watching the heavy decades fade, realizing exactly how this physical metropolitan foundation was made. I remember sitting completely quiet, strictly in the passenger seat, watching the old man strictly navigating the absolute heavy street. The heavy hands resting perfectly, entirely on the steering wheel, teaching me exactly how the absolute genuine street respect should feel. He worked the heavy shifts, carrying the physical burden all alone, building up our massive castle, completely strictly out of heavy stone. We taking those long drives completely entirely under the street light, learning the heavy difference between the absolute physical wrong and right. He never asked for a heavy medal, never strictly begged for applause, just entirely completely fighting for the absolute heavy family cause. The heavy move bass, completely matching the rhythm of his old ride, filling up my physical chest completely with an undeniable heavy pride. Yeah, they carried the heavy weight so we could entirely touch the sky, wiping away the physical tears every single time we had to cry. Built a heavy, undeniable shelter entirely out of love and trust, protecting the physical family completely from the heavy metropolitan dust. Yeah, the undeniable heavy debt is something I can never repay, just honoring the heavy sacrifices entirely every single day. I step strictly through the heavy wooden front door from the cold air, feeling the absolute heavy physical safety entirely. Waiting there. The heavy smell of the warm dinner completely waiting strictly on the stove, the absolute heavy center of our entirely physical treasure cove. I watch my mother strictly standing completely entirely by the flame, making sure the heavy metropolitan exhaustion never entirely overcame. She stitched the heavy physical fabric entirely, completely holding us tight, chasing away the absolute heavy shadows hiding in the physical night. The heavy box entirely strictly clinking in the physical background noise, creating the absolute perfect harmony for the physical girls and boys. She sacrificed the heavy dream strictly so I could entirely chase my own, planting the absolute heavy, undeniable physical seeds that I have grown. No heavy diamonds entirely strictly shining upon her physical hand, but she is the absolute heavy, undisputed queen of this physical land. They carried the heavy weight so we could entirely touch the sky, wiping away the physical tears every single time we had to cry. Built a heavy, undeniable shelter entirely out of love and trust, protecting the physical family completely from the heavy metropolitan dust. Yeah, the undeniable heavy debt is something I can never repay, just honoring the heavy sacrifices entirely every single day. Yeah. The physical envelope on the table entirely filled with the past due bills. The heavy physical mountain that entirely completely tested their absolute wills, but they entirely completely strictly shielded me from the heavy stress, making sure my physical childhood was an absolute undeniable success. I thought the heavy clothes on my back completely strictly grew on trees, never seeing the heavy physical hours that brought them to their knees. The heavy acoustic guitar picking entirely, completely strictly in the groove, dictating entirely how the absolute heavy family physical units move. They gave me the heavy armor that completely strictly faced the avenue, providing the absolute heavy physical, undeniable, pure and honest view. Every single heavy dollar entirely strictly stretched to the absolute edge, standing completely unbroken entirely upon the heavy physical edge. I look at the heavy physical wrinkles entirely mapping their physical face, an absolute masterpiece of the entirely undisputed physical grace. They carried the heavy weight so we could entirely touch the sky, wiping away the physical tears every single time we had to cry. Built a heavy, undeniable shelter entirely out of love and trust, protecting the physical family completely from the heavy metropolitan dust. Yeah, the undeniable heavy debt is something I can never repay, just honoring the heavy sacrifices entirely
every single day. Now I'm entirely, completely standing exactly on my own 2 feet. Walking entirely confident, strictly down the absolute heavy physical street. And every single heavy step I take is entirely dedicated completely to them. The absolute, undeniably heavy physical root of the metropolitan stem. I pour a heavy glass of strictly, completely, entirely premium wine, making entirely sure the absolute heavy family tree is doing completely fine. We keeping the entirely undeniable physical legacy is absolutely alive. The ultimate heavy reason that I strictly, entirely continue to strictly strive. The heavy, naughty, slow rhythm, completely, entirely, strictly playing for the old school, following the absolute, undeniably heavy, golden, physical family rule.
Yeah. Put your ear completely, strictly to the pavement. You can hear the heavy pulse before you even see the physical sun. The city is a massive machine, and it absolutely never stops breathing. Let the heavy bass strictly match the sound of the asphalt. We dropping the heavy metropolitan groove. Listen to the block. Yo, stepping straight out the heavy iron gate onto the cracked concrete. The thick morning humidity strictly wrapping around the physical street. The heavy sanitation truck rumbling right down the narrow lane, providing the absolute first note of the metropolitan strain. A couple kids bouncing a heavy leather basketball against the brick, creating a massive undisputed rhythm that is undeniably thick. You don't need a heavy studio to completely catch a fresh beat. The absolute masterpiece is written completely underneath your feet. I watch a heavy black Tahoe rolling strictly down the avenue, cutting perfectly straight entirely through the morning dew. The heavy rubber tire strictly slapping against the physical tar, the absolute, undeniably heavy anthem of the metropolitan star. We moving strictly in sync, completely with the heavy traffic flow, exactly where the absolute, true physical street hustlers go. The concrete jungle is playing a heavy metropolitan song,
Exactly where the physical street legends
completely belong. The heavy siren strictly
crying completely in the distant air.
while we are strictly moving through the avenue without a care.
Yeah, the heavy rhythm is exactly
Completely deep in my bones,
navigating completely flawlessly
through the metropolitan stone. The midday sun completely beating strictly on the physical block. The heavy shadow slowly moving exactly like an analog clock. I post up strictly against the heavy chain link fence. The physical metropolitan energy is absolutely strictly intense. You hear the heavy muffled jackhammer tearing up the physical road, adding a heavy aggressive layer strictly to the neighborhood code. A classic Chevrolet Impala strictly scraping the physical ground, pushing out the absolute maximum, undeniably heavy street sound. The hydraulic switch is strictly clicking perfectly in the physical groove, dictated exactly how the heavy metropolitan physical bodies move. The undisputed street conductor strictly orchestrating the noise, balancing the absolute heavy chaos exactly with the physical poise. It is a massive heavy symphony, completely written in the gray dust, built entirely, completely, strictly on the physical street trust. The concrete jungle is playing a heavy metropolitan song,
exactly where the physical street legends
completely belong.
The heavy siren strictly crying completely in the distant air,
While we are strictly moving through the avenue without a care.
yeah, the heavy rhythm is exactly
Completely deep in my bone,
navigating completely flawlessly
through the metropolitan stone. The heavy neon signs completely strictly buzzing in the physical dark, throwing the heavy color glow completely right across the local park. The tempo strictly changes completely exactly when the moon arrives, dictating the absolute heavy rhythm of the metropolitan lives. A heavy metal fire escape completely rattling entirely in the wind. A heavy physical reminder of the heavy physical places we've been. I hear the heavy glass shattering completely in the distant alleyway. The heavy physical conclusion to the absolute, undeniable physical day. But the heavy bass line strictly keeps completely rolling through the night, keeping the heavy physical metropolitan vision absolutely bright. The heavy footsteps completely strictly echoing on the empty streets, synchronize it completely, entirely with undeniable heavy beat. The heavy physical metropolitan jungle completely claiming its absolute own, standing absolutely undefeated, strictly on the physical concrete throne. Yeah, the concrete jungle
is playing a heavy metropolitan song.
Exactly where the physical street legends
Completely belong.
The heavy siren strictly crime, completely in the distant air.
While we are strictly moving through the avenue without a care.
Yeah, the heavy rhythm is exactly
Completely deep in my bone,
navigating
completely flawlessly through the metropolitan stone. You absolutely got it completely. Feel the heavy physical frequency. It is an absolute, undeniable metropolitan physical emergency. The heavy architecture, completely, strictly dictating the entire sound. The heavy roots, entirely, completely, strictly buried underground. The undisputed heavy champions, completely, strictly playing their part. They're carrying the heavy concrete rhythm, entirely, exactly in their heart. We strictly surviving, completely, exactly on the heavy physical instinct alone. Carving an absolute physical empire directly into the metropolitan stone. The heavy rhythm, completely, strictly keeps entirely moving, completely ahead.
but remembering every single heavy physical word that the avenue said.
Yeah. The sky turned. Yeah. The sky turned completely dark. Right. The sky turned completely dark right around 3:45. A heavy sheet of water strictly washing the avenue floor. I popped the black canopy open, hearing the physical snap. Caught completely in the middle of a heavy metropolitan trap. The leather boots stepping carefully, entirely over the grate, embracing the absolute heavy rhythm of the physical fate. A distant saxophone bleeding strictly from a basement bar, mixing perfectly with the heavy ties of a passing car. The yellow street lights reflecting completely on the wet street. A heavy visual masterpiece entirely beneath my physical feet. I grip the wooden handle strictly with a heavy tight hold, navigating entirely through the absolute physical code. Every single heavy raindrop playing the physical drum fill, keeping the absolute heavy metropolitan atmosphere completely still.
The city is weeping,
Strictly under the heavy gray sky,
watching the reflection of the street lights.
slowly wash by. We walking in the rhythm,
Completely hidden in the rain.
washing away the absolute heavy.
Metropolitan pain.
Yeah, the jazz is playing softly,
Directly in the cold air.
gliding through the puddles.
Completely without a single care.
Yeah. The heavy water pouring strictly down the corner drain. A perfectly orchestrated, undeniable physical strain. I pull the trench coat collar directly up to my chin. A silent heavy battle that the weather is trying to win. But I am strictly moving smooth beneath the absolute dome, making the wet physical pavement entirely feel like home. The upright bass walking perfectly in the physical background. A massive, undeniably heavy and beautiful street sound. A couple rushing strictly by, holding the newspaper high, trying entirely, completely to stay absolutely physical drive. But you gotta completely embrace the heavy atmospheric mood, exactly how the absolute heavy street legends completely understood the drop, strictly sliding right down the edge of the black cloth, exactly like a heavy physical, undeniably ancient moth.
The city is weeping,
Strictly under the heavy
gray sky, watching the reflection of the street lights.
slowly wash by. We walking in the rhythm,
Completely hidden in the rain.
washing away the absolute heavy.
Metropolitan pain.
Yeah, the jazz is playing softly,
Directly in the cold air.
like the gliding through the puddles.
Completely without a single care.
The heavy neon sign flickering completely right through the midst. An undeniable heavy physical detail that cannot be missed. The jazz trumpet strictly answering the heavy thunder roll, healing the heavy exhaustion entirely inside the street soul. I stop strictly at the intersection, waiting for the red light. A solitary heavy figure completely absorbing the night. The heavy water splashing directly up from the physical curb. A beautiful heavy silence that nobody can strictly disturb. The rhythm of the precipitation perfectly strictly keeps the time, walking straight in the absolute heavy undisputed
the physical rhyme. We entirely, completely moving exactly at a steady, slow pace. Taking up a heavy physical, undeniably permanent space. The canvas umbrella blocking the absolute heavy downpour, leaving the heavy physical avenue, completely asking for more.
The city is weeping,
Strictly under the heavy,
gray sky, watching the reflection of the street lights
slowly wash by. We walking in the rhythm,
completely hidden in the rain.
washing away the absolute heavy.
Metropolitan pain.
Yeah,
The jazz is playing softly, directly in the cold air,
gliding through the puddles.
completely without a single care.
The heavy storm completely, strictly starting to slowly fade out. Knowing exactly what the heavy metropolitan struggle is about. The heavy clouds parting just enough to completely show the moon. And in the absolute heavy physical jazz melody entirely too soon. But the puddles strictly hold the memory of the heavy rainfall, answering the absolute undeniably heavy physical street call. I lowered the heavy umbrella, shaking the physical water off. Hearing the heavy distant undeniably physical street cough. The air is entirely, completely, strictly smelling incredibly clean. The absolute sharpest heavy metropolitan physical scene. We entirely, completely, strictly conquered the physical wet block, moving entirely smoothly against the heavy physical street clock. The heavy jazz sample strictly echoes completely down the lane. The undisputed heavy royalty of the metropolitan rain.
The city is weeping,
Strictly under the heavy,
gray sky, watching the reflection of the street lights
slowly wash by. We walking in the river, but
completely hidden in the rain.
washing away the absolute heavy.
Metropolitan pain.
Yeah, the jazz is playing softly,
Directly in the cold air,
gliding through the puddles.
completely without a single care.
Yeah, you gotta completely feel the rhythm of the drops. Nothing but the wet pavement in the upright bass.
Keep the black canvas strictly tilted against the wind.
Yeah, the avenue. Let's go. The avenue is completely focused entirely on the physical grind, but the absolute greatest treasure is the state of the mind. I walk strictly past the heavy crowds and the neon lights, looking for a completely different way to conquer the nights. Push the heavy brass handle of the old library door, stepping entirely away from the metropolitan war. The smell of old bindings and the heavy yellow ink, the absolute perfect physical sanctuary, strictly just to think. You got brothers on the block entirely chasing the cash, running a completely dangerous and undeniable heavy dash. But I am pulling a heavy encyclopedia off the wooden shelf, taking the necessary time to entirely elevate myself. Yeah, every single heavy page is completely opening a new door, leaving the absolute ignorant strictly completely on the floor. You gotta read the heavy chapters of the ancient past if you want your physical metropolitan empire to strictly last. Expanding the vision, strictly far beyond the street, finding the rhythm where the paper and the intellect meet, turning the heavy pages deep into the midnight hour,
Building the absolute undeniable mental power.
yeah, the physical chains can never hold the educated brain.
Rising completely above the heavy.
Metropolitan pain. I see the young cats completely mesmerized by the gold, forgetting the absolute greatest stories that were ever told. They memorize the physical prices of the heavy luxury gear, but completely lack the vocabulary to make that vision clear. You gotta swallow the philosophy in the heavy mathematics to completely navigate the absolute heavy street pragmatics. I am sitting in the leather chair entirely under the reading lamp, representing for the completely focused intellectual camp. A heavy hardcover volume resting completely on my knee, learning exactly how to keep my absolute spirit free. The physical muscles completely fade when you get incredibly old, but the educated mind is entirely worth its weight in gold. I read the heavy biographies of the kings and the saints, learning how to strictly break completely out of the restraints. The warm wordlets of piano matching the rhythm of the red, playing the absolute undeniable heavy intellectual seed.
Expanding the vision,
Strictly strictly far beyond the street.
Finding the rhythm where the paper and the intellect meet.
Turning the heavy pages deep into the midnight hour.
Building the absolute, undeniable mental power.
Yeah, the physical chains can never hold the educated brain.
Rising completely above the heavy
Metropolitan pain. The heavy vocabulary strictly changes the way you entirely speak, making sure your physical presentation is absolutely never weak. When you sit down completely at the heavy negotiation table, you gotta be entirely intellectually and physically able. The street smarts completely keep your physical body alive, but the books entirely teach you exactly how to truly thrive. I am entirely completely stacking the heavy volumes up high, building the heavy mental staircase, strictly reaching for the sky. You can entirely completely take the heavy physical money away, but the knowledge entirely in my head is absolutely going to stay. We studying the heavy maps and the undeniable global charts, mastering the absolute heaviest physical and mental arts. The dusty vinyl crackling completely underneath the heavy beat, providing the absolute perfect educational soundtrack for the street. You gotta entirely strictly rad to completely understand the game. Or the heavy metropolitan predators will entirely erase your name.
expanding the vision, strictly far beyond the street.
Finding the rhythm where the paper
And the intellect meet. Turning the heavy pages deep
into the midnight hour.
Building the absolute, undeniable mental power.
Yeah, the physical chains can never hold the educated brain.
Rising completely above the heavy
Metropolitan pain. The grandfather clock entirely striking completely in the hall, answering the absolute undeniable heavy educational call. I close the heavy back cover and I take a deep and heavy breath, conquering the absolute ignorance, which is entirely a mental death. You gotta pass the heavy books completely down to the youth, teaching them exactly how to find the undeniable written truth. The physical neighborhood entirely needs more than just a brave. We need the absolute heavy thinkers to completely, entirely say the absolute, undeniably heavy future of the metropolitan grid depends entirely on the heavy books you give to the physical kid. Building the heavy library entirely inside my physical home. Never completely wandering the heavy avenue entirely alone, because the absolute heavy authors are completely walking by my side, providing the absolute ultimate undeniable intellectual pride. So entirely complete, we pick up a book and read the heavy line and watch your physical
metropolitan universe completely shine.
Yeah. Stepping out the let's go. Stepping out the front door, the heavy breeze is feeling right, shaking off the physical shadows entirely from the Saturday night. I cruise directly down the avenue, heading straight to the store, looking for the vintage wax that I've been absolutely hunting for. Flipping through the dusty crates, physical fingers turning black, searching for that ultimate undisputed heavy analog track. I pull out a classic soul record with a completely faded sleeve, the greatest kind of physical magic you could ever entirely believe. Drop the heavy needle on the groove, hear the beautiful hits, a simple heavy pleasure that the fast lane will absolutely miss. Got a stack of heavy rhythm sitting strictly right in my hand, the smoothest lifestyle absolutely operating completely in this land. We living perfectly, completely inside the analog groove, taking our time, watching exactly how the neighborhood moves. From the heavy vinyl records to the classic chrome wheels, showing the entire physical universe exactly how it feels. Yeah, the Sunday lifestyle's an absolute undeniable art, keeping the heavy passion strictly pumping inside the heart. I park the heavy Cadillac directly in the concrete driveway shade, enjoying the absolute masterpiece that the heavy weekend made. Got the heavy bucket filled with the soapy water and the sponge, taking it deep and physical, completely undeniably relaxing plunge, polishing the heavy chrome until it completely shines like the sun. Showing the younger cats exactly how the proper detailing is done. The white wall tires looking absolutely incredibly physically clean, the sharpest physical reality completely on the metropolitan scene. It takes a heavy patience exactly just to maintain the classic ride, a completely undeniable display of the heavy neighborhood pride. I sit back strictly on the porch, wiping the sweat entirely off my face, enjoying the absolute heavy rhythm completely in my personal space.
We living perfectly, completely inside the analog groove, taking our time, watching exactly how the neighborhood moves. From the heavy vinyl records to the classic chrome wheels, showing the entire physical universe exactly how it feels. Yeah, the Sunday lifestyle is an absolute undeniable art, keeping the heavy passion strictly pumping inside the heart. I grab the heavy silver camera resting strictly right on the decks, ready to completely capture the neighborhood exactly at its best. Loading up the 35mm film strictly in the back, making sure the physical focus is completely undeniably exact. Walking down the boulevard looking for the perfect heavy frame before the absolute passage of time completely changes the street game. Snap a heavy picture of the older cats entirely playing dominoes, documenting exactly how the heavy metropolitan history completely goes. No second chances, you absolutely gotta completely catch the real light before the physical afternoon entirely fades directly into the night. It is a heavy hobby, strictly freezing physical time entirely in a square, showing the undisputed heavy truth completely waiting out there. We living perfectly, completely inside the analog groove, taking our time, watching exactly how the neighborhood moves. From the heavy vinyl records to the classic chrome wheels, showing the entire physical universe exactly how it feels. Yeah, the Sunday lifestyle is an absolute undeniable art, keeping the heavy passion strictly pumping inside the heart. The street lights flickering, the heavy sun is completely entirely gone, but the physical Sunday lifestyle is absolutely strictly moving on. I step exactly into the local hall, smelling the heavy cigar smoke, where the undisputed heavy neighborhood legends absolutely spoke. I grab a wooden cue stick, completely chalk the heavy leather tip, taking a strictly smooth and absolutely undeniably confident grip. The heavy mood bass entirely bouncing right off the green felt, the greatest physical atmosphere that I have absolutely ever felt. I line up the heavy shot, knock the solid 8 ball directly in the hole, a perfect undeniable victory exactly for the heavy physical soul. Surrounded by the brotherhood, strictly laughing in the dim light, wrapping up the absolute undeniably perfect physical weekend night. We living perfectly, completely inside the analog groove, taking our time, watching exactly how the neighborhood moves. From the heavy vinyl records to the classic chrome wheels, showing the entire physical universe exactly how it feels. Yeah, the Sunday lifestyle is an absolute undeniable art, keeping the heavy passion strictly pumping inside the heart.
Staring at the staring at the chalkboard. Staring at the chalkboard, trying to keep my focus tight, but the sunshine is calling from the middle of the daylight. The teacher's voice is fading right into a muffled hum, waiting for the ultimate playground rhythm to finally come. 2 minutes left, I got my sneakers laced and ready, keeping my breathing low and my anticipation steady. The iron bell screams, shaking the plaster on the wall, a massive stampede heading straight down the painted hall, slamming the metal lockers, grabbing the brown paper sack, shrugging the faded denim jackets right onto our backs. The smell of the floor wax mixing with the cafeteria heat, stepping out the double doors right onto the concrete, the deep bassline dropping exactly as the sunshine hits, leaving behind the quiet room where the quiet scholar sits. What? Running through the blacktop, soaking up the afternoon breeze. The only place,
The only place where the neighborhood kids are at total ease.
feel 15 minutes of glory.
Underneath the open sky,
Watching the golden years of the childhood.
slowly flying by.
Yeah, the asphalt playground.
Is a magical concrete land,
Holding the ultimate freedom.
right inside the palm of your hand.
Yeah. Out on the yard, the hierarchy is instantly set. We headed straight for the basketball hoop with the chain net. The rubber ball bouncing, kicking up the yellow dust, building a roster based on nothing but the blacktop trust. Over by the fence, the girls are turning the double Dutch rope, moving with the kind of rhythm that gives a neighborhood hope. The slap of the braided cord hitting the ground on the beat. A flawless execution right on the edge of the street. Trading the juice box for a handful of the potato chips while the local playground gossip is spreading across the lips. You gotta navigate the recess just like a master game, building up the early foundation of your local name. The nostalgic piano playing a melody sweet and slow, dictating exactly how the youth of the neighborhood grow.
Running through the blacktop,
Soaking up the afternoon breeze.
the only place where the neighborhood kids are at total ease.
15 minutes of glory.
Underneath the open sky,
Watching the golden years of the childhood.
slowly flying by.
Yeah, the asphalt playground.
Is a magical concrete land,
Holding the ultimate freedom.
right inside the palm of your hand.
Yeah. Ducking behind the bleachers to avoid the yard duty stare. Breathing in the unfiltered, pure and authentic air. Passing the folded paper notes with the secret lines. Reading the early versions of the adolescent signs. Showing off the fresh kicks, scuffing up the rubber soles. Imagining a million different legendary goals. The jungle gym is a fortress made of rusted steel pipes, where everybody earns their authentic and early stripes. We laughing so hard that the stomach muscles start to ache. Enjoying every single second of the legendary break. No worries about the mortgage, no thinking about the rent. Just pure energy being beautifully and recklessly spent. The G-funk rhythm is hidden in the clapping of the hands. The undisputed rulers of these temporary lands.
Running through the blacktop,
Soaking up the afternoon breeze.
the only place where the neighborhood kids are at total ease.
15 minutes of glory.
Underneath the open sky,
Watching the golden years of the childhood.
slowly flying by.
Yeah, the asphalt playground.
Is a magical concrete land,
Holding the ultimate freedom.
right inside the palm of your hand.
But you can feel the man is slipping right through the open hand. The hourglass is running out of the playground sand. The distant whistle blows, echoing across the wide yard, bringing us back to a reality that is undeniably hard. The second bell rings, cutting through the outer noise, rounding up the scattered groups of the local girls and boys, wiping the sweat off the forehead with the cotton sleeve, taking one last breath before we absolutely have to leave. Lining up single file on the painted yellow line, knowing that this brief window of freedom was truly divine. We step back into the quiet of the educational zone, but the rhythm of the playground stays deep inside the bone. Walking back to the desk, opening the hardcover book, trading the silent knowing
Legendary West Coast love. Running through the blacktop,
soaking up the afternoon breeze.
the only place where the neighborhood kids are at total ease.
15 minutes of glory.
Underneath the open sky,
Watching the golden years of the childhood.
slowly flying by.
Yeah, the asphalt playground.
Is a magical concrete land,
Holding the ultimate freedom.
right inside the palm of your hand.
Yeah. Walking down the sun-baked sidewalk to the neighborhood corner store. Got a pocket full of crumpled bills and I'm strictly looking to score. Not the heavy street hustle, chasing a completely different thrill. Looking for the legendary faces, printed on the cardboard brass bell chimes on the glass door as I step into the cool breeze. Pointing at the unopened display box, putting my mind at ease. Handing over the paper money, grabbing a heavy stack of the wax. Preparing for the ultimate weekend hunt, entirely ready to relax. Now stepping back out into the heat, gripping the foil tight in my hand. Holding the absolute greatest diamond heroes across the entire land. The moot baseline bumping smooth from a passing drop top ride, while I am sitting on the concrete stoop, bursting with the collector's pride. We hunting for the cardboard legends, printed in the glossy ink. A piece of heavy diamond history, giving the man a way to think. Checking the heavy statistics, printed right on the flip side. They taking the journey to the outfield on a smooth West Coast ride. Yeah, the city is loud, but the binder is keeping it incredibly calm. Holding the absolute greatest players directly in the palm. Yeah, I slide my thumbnail right underneath the folded wax flap, escaping completely out of the heavy metropolitan concrete trap. The smell of the powdery gum hits the summer air, incredibly sweet. A perfectly undeniable ritual happening right on the quiet street. Tossing the stiff pink gum aside, getting down to the real meat. Looking for the ultimate rookie card to make the collection complete. Flipping past the middle relievers and the completely unknown names. Hunting for the heavy hitters dominating the hot summer games. I see the sharp white borders in the perfectly centered frame. A beautiful action shot capturing the absolute glory of the game. No big corners, the physical condition is absolutely pristine. The sharpest piece of cardboard that the neighborhood has ever seen. I slide it gently into the plastic penny sleeve to keep it completely safe, protecting the heavy investment right inside this urban space. Oh, we hunting for the cardboard legends, printed in the glossy ink. A piece of heavy diamond history, giving the man a way to think. Checking the heavy statistics, printed right on the flip side. Taking the journey to the outfield on a smooth West Coast ride. Yeah, the city is loud, but the binder is keeping it incredibly calm. Holding the absolute greatest players directly in the palm. The homies roll up on the BMX bikes, dropping the kickstands down. The undisputed heavy cardboard traders of this western town. We open up the heavy non-pocket binders right on the porch floor, negotiating the classic trades exactly like a metropolitan in war. He wants my legendary southpaw pitcher with the heavy earned run average. I tell him the asking price is absolutely gonna be incredibly savage. I need that golf oil slugger that he pulled just the other week. The exact piece of the puzzle that my collection actively seeks. We sliding the cards out of the plastic, checking the edges in the light, making sure the physical condition is entirely and perfectly right. A firm handshake completely seals the heavy neighborhood deal, exactly how the authentic West Coast collectors are supposed to feel. The Hammond organ playing the smooth melody in the background noise, separating the legendary collectors from the regular street boys. Oh, we hunting for the cardboard legends, printed in the glossy ink. A piece of heavy diamond history, giving the man a way to think. Checking the heavy statistics, printed right on the flip side. Taking the journey to the outfield on a smooth West Coast ride. Yeah, the city is loud, but the binder is keeping it incredibly calm. Holding the absolute greatest players directly in the palm. The years are gonna pass and the physical neighborhood is gonna change. The reality of the avenue is gonna completely rearrange. But these heavy cardboard squares are freezing the absolute time, matching the undeniable rhythm of my completely laid back rhyme. I stack the heavy plastic cages directly into the cardboard box, secured safely away from the heavy ticking of the analog clocks. The dust might gather on the lid, but the magic completely remains, washing away the heavy exhaustion of the metropolitan pain. When the physical world gets too loud, I just pull the collection out, remember
remembering exactly what this undeniably beautiful life is about. The crack of the wooden bat echoing directly in the deep groove, dictating exactly how the heavy diamond legends completely move. We preserving the absolute undeniable history of the grand old game, making sure the physical universe absolutely remembers that name. We hunting for the cardboard legends printed in the glossy ink, a piece of heavy diamond history, giving a man a way to think. Checking the heavy statistics printed right on the flip side, taking the journey to the outfield on a smooth West Coast ride. We hunting for the cardboard legends printed in the glossy ink, a piece of heavy diamond history, giving a man a way to think. Checking the heavy statistics printed right on the flip side, taking the journey to the outfield on a smooth West Coast ride. Yeah, the city is loud, but the binder is keeping it incredibly calm, holding the absolute greatest players directly in the palm. Walking down the sun-baked sidewalk to the neighborhood corner store, got a pocket full of crumpled bills, and I'm strictly looking to score. Not the heavy street hustle, chasing a completely different thrill, looking for the legendary faces printed on the cardboard bill. The brass bell chimes on the glass door as I step into the cool breeze, pointing at the unopened display box, putting my mind at ease. Handing over the paper money, grabbing the heavy stack of the wax, preparing for the ultimate weekend hunt, entirely ready to relax. Stepping back out into the heat, gripping the foil tight in my hand, holding the absolute greatest diamond heroes across the entire land. The move bass line bumping smooth from a passion drop top ride, while I'm sitting on the concrete stool, bursting with the collector's pride. We hunting for the cardboard legends printed in the glossy ink, a piece of heavy diamond history, giving a man a way to think. Checking the heavy statistics printed right on the flip side, taking the journey to the outfield on a smooth West Coast ride. Yeah, the city is loud, but the binder is keeping it incredibly calm, holding the absolute greatest players directly in the palm. I slide my thumbnail right underneath the folded.
Got a pocket weighing me down with pure silver quarters. Listen to that coin drop down the metal slot. Let the electric piano ride the heavy moog bass. Player one, press start. Walking through the double door, smelling the hot pizza slice. The absolute ultimate neighborhood escape, worth any physical price. I slide right up to the yellow cabinet, glowing in the dark corner. A legendary maze runner, the absolute original street performer. Yeah, drop the heavy silver coin straight into the glowing red slot, giving the 82 classic absolutely everything that I got. My left hand gripping the red ball of the heavy joystick tight, navigating the neon blue corridors deep into the artificial night. Chasing the blinking dots, running completely from the painted ghost, hitting a heavy power pellet, doing exactly what I love the most. The high score is a massive mountain that I absolutely gotta climb, losing track completely of the physical metropolitan, passing time. The 8-bit rhythm perfectly matching the heavy G-funk bassline, knowing that the top spot on the glass is gonna be completely mine. Living completely inside the glow of the heavy cathode screen, the absolute greatest visual escape that the neighborhood has seen. Pushing the plastic buttons, making the heavy digital moves, locked perfectly, completely inside these undeniable arcade grooves. Yeah, the physical avenue is waiting right outside the door, but we are chasing the glory of the ultimate heavy high score. Yeah, I wipe the sweat off my palm and step over to the fighting row, exactly where the real heavyweight neighborhood competitors go. A massive crowd gathers strictly around the Street Fighter glass, watching the absolute physical hours of the weekend slowly pass. I drop my quarter directly on the screen to reserve my heavy spot, watching the current champion connecting with the heavy digital shot. He knows the fireball strictly across the painted temple stage, unleashing an absolute, undeniable, heavy electronic rage. My turn is up, I grab the stick and pick the warrior in white, ready to absolutely conquer the heavy, undeniable street fight. Rolling the joystick forward, punching the heavy plastic button down, taking the heavy championship belt of this electronic town. The synthetic voice screaming exactly when the heavy combo lands. A perfect physical execution, strictly coming from our rapid hands. Living completely inside the glow of the heavy cathode screen, the absolute greatest visual escape that the neighborhood has seen. Pushing the plastic buttons, making the heavy digital moves, locked perfectly, completely inside these undeniable arcade grooves. Yeah, the physical avenue is waiting right outside the door, but we could chasing the glory of the ultimate heavy high score. Yeah, the air is entirely, completely thick with the heavy competitive heat, a beautiful, undeniable extension of the heavy physical street. Nobody cares about your zip code when you holding the player too. It is strictly about exactly what your fast fingers can completely do. I walk over to the driving game, sliding into the plastic seat, putting the heavy pedal directly underneath my heavy leather feet, shifting the heavy gears, racing entirely through the pixel track, knowing that the physical clock is absolutely never turning back. The tokens turning my fingers completely black from the heavy metal dust, an undeniable arcade foundation built completely on the neighborhood trust. I see the older cats entirely focused on the classic pinball machine, keeping the physical silver ball completely bouncing, incredibly clean. The flippers clicking loudly, completely, perfectly, strictly to the beat. An absolute, undeniable sanctuary, completely hidden from the street. Living completely inside the glow of the heavy cathode screen, the absolute greatest visual escape that the neighborhood has seen. Pushing the plastic buttons, making the heavy digital moves, locked perfectly, complete inside undeniable arcade grooves. Yeah, the physical avenue is waiting right outside the door, but we got chasing the glory of the ultimate heavy high score. Heavy high score. The heavy glass doors are reflecting the dark blue of the night. We've been completely, strictly battling directly under the black light. I got one final heavy quarter completely burning inside my hand. The absolute last physical ticket completely inside this digital land. I step up to the beat 'em up, walking through the pixelated hood, exactly how the undeniable 90s arcade legends always stood. Entering my three heavy initials completely directly on the screen, leaving my absolute undeniable mark entirely on the neon scene. The manager flashes the overhead lights, telling us it's time to go, taking the absolute heavy metropolitan reality completely slow. I push the heavy glass door, stepping back onto the concrete floor, knowing I will be completely back tomorrow, entirely fighting for more. The heavy mug bass carrying me all the way back to the block. Heavy high score.
I see you. Yeah. I see you growing up. I see you growing up, stepping into the physical street, trying to find a proper rhythm for your own 2 feet. The neighborhood is a maze, built out of heavy gray stone, but you absolutely never have to walk the pavement alone. I watch you looking at the older cats posted on the block, trying to speed up their hands on the metropolitan clock. But you gotta build the foundation deep down in the dirt before you try to wear the heavy, undeniable street shirt. Remember what the old man told us cruising in the Impala ride, watching the city pass by from the leather passenger side. The true respect is absolutely earned strictly by the sweat, a heavy physical lesson that you never should forget. Keep your vision completely focused straight on the ultimate prize, and never let the street corners hypnotize your young eyes. Hold your head up high, exactly where the heavy sun shines, reading the undeniable truth between the concrete lines. The world is gonna try to pull your heavy shoulders down, but you gotta walk like a king inside this western town. Yeah, the physical road is long and the weather is rough, but the blood inside your veins is
is undeniably tough. Yeah, you see the heavy flash, the gold shining in the dark, but that ain't leaving an absolute permanent undeniable mark. The real wealth is carried strictly inside of the mind, leaving the foolish illusions entirely far behind. I've seen way too many runners trip and take a heavy fall, trying to sprint the avenue before they even learn to crawl. You gotta take it slow, exactly like a 90 slow track, and make entirely sure you got your family covering your back. Remember the hot meals waiting for us on the kitchen stove, the absolute strongest foundation inside this family cove. Don't ever trade the heavy loyalty for a fistful of green. Keep your physical reputation entirely undeniably clean. When the heavy pressure pushes directly on your chest, you absolutely gotta stand up tall and pass the heavy test. Hold your head up high, exactly where the heavy sun shines, reading the undeniable truth between the concrete lines. The world is gonna try to pull your heavy shoulders down, but you gotta walk like a king inside this western town. Yeah, the physical road is long and the weather is rough, but the blood inside your veins is undeniably tough. Yeah, they gonna test your heavy patience every single day, trying to completely push you out the absolute heavy way. But you gotta stand rooted exactly like a heavy oak tree, showing the entire avenue exactly who you plan to be. We come from a heavy line of undeniable survivors, navigating the metropolitan grid exactly like the classic drivers. Keep the steering wheel entirely, completely, strictly tight, and steer your heavy path directly into the physical light. The heavy respect ain't demanded, it is completely grown, carving your heavy initials directly into the physical stone. Listen to the jazz flute floating in the evening breeze, taking the absolute heavy obstacles with undeniable ease. You got the heavy potential locked inside your physical frame, ready to absolutely conquer this unforgiving street game. Hold your head up high, exactly where the heavy sun shines, reading the undeniable truth between the concrete lines. The world is gonna try to pull your heavy shoulders down, but you gotta walk like a king inside this western town. Yeah, the physical road is long, and the weather is rough, but the blood inside your veins is undeniably tough. So lace your heavy boots completely, entirely up to the top, and promise me you absolutely, undeniably will never stop. The heavy rain is gonna wash the physical pavement clean, preparing you for the absolute greatest metropolitan scene. Keep your shoulders entirely, completely, strictly pulled back, staying completely, flawlessly aligned with the heavy track. I am strictly walking exactly by your physical side, enjoying the absolute, undeniable beauty of the ride. You got the heavy heart, you got the undeniable street smarts, mastering the absolute heaviest physical metropolitan art. So step out off the heavy wooden porch tonight and strictly claim your undeniable physical street right. The heavy move bass is completely playing just for you, guiding exactly everything you absolutely plan to do. Hold your head up high, exactly where the heavy sun shines, reading the undeniable truth between the concrete lines. The world is gonna try to pull your heavy shoulders down, but you gotta walk like a king inside this western town. Yeah, the physical road is long and the weather is rough, but the blood inside your veins is undeniably tough.
The stars are completely gone, replaced by a million glowing squares in a heavy concrete sky. The absolute massive vertical grid. We taking a slow ride completely through the bottom of the canyon. A 90 slowed exclusive. Drop the heavy bass line and let the chimes ring. I am steering the heavy Cadillac strictly through the narrow street, looking completely upward from the absolute physical driver's seat. The massive steel tower stretching directly into the absolute black, carrying the entire heavy metropolitan weight strictly on their back.
Every single window is a glowing yellow physical square, floating completely silently in the freezing midnight air. Thousands of heavy lights stacked entirely 100 stories high, creating an absolute, undeniable, artificial, physical sky. The street level is covered strictly in a heavy shade, but up above the clouds, a massive glowing empire is made. I watch the halogen reflection strictly bouncing off the hood. A quiet nighttime language that is perfectly understood. The heavy rubber rolling completely over the physical wet stone, surrounded by a million lights, but feeling completely, entirely alone. The heavy glass towers are glowing strictly in the dark, leaving an absolute, permanent, undeniable metropolitan mark. We cruising at the bottom of the glowing concrete maze, caught entirely, completely in the heavy artificial midnight haze. Yeah, the glowing yellow windows are entirely shining bright. The undisputed heavy royalty of the absolute physical night. I'm wondering exactly who was standing completely behind the glass, watching the heavy hours of the physical midnight slowly pass. The late night hustlers counting the absolute physical paper stacks, while the heavy street level operators strictly watch their back. A massive glowing high, but the absolute, undeniable physical grind, leaving the absolute entire rest of the sleeping physical world behind. The heavy rude bass completely bouncing exactly off the brick walls, while the heavy shadow completely, strictly, undeniably falls. I hit the heavy corner, strictly taking it incredibly slow, basking completely, strictly in the absolute heavy vertical glow. The physical architecture completely trapping the undeniable light, a heavy physical masterpiece shining strictly in the absolute night. It is entirely a silent, heavy movie, completely playing on repeat, while I'm entirely, strictly regulating the physical street. The heavy glass towers are glowing strictly in the dark, leaving an absolute, permanent, undeniable metropolitan mark. We cruising at the bottom of the glowing concrete maze, caught entirely, completely in the heavy artificial midnight haze. Yeah. The glowing yellow windows are entirely shining bright. The undisputed heavy royalty of the absolute physical night. Yeah. The entire heavy grid is completely, strictly built to steel and glass, a heavy monument that the absolute entire physical globe cannot surpass. I roll the heavy window down strictly to catch the freezing breeze, moving entirely, completely, strictly with the absolute maximum ease. Be it ethereal chimes completely ringing entirely in the physical air, matching the heavy glowing windows completely, strictly, exactly there. It is entirely, completely, an undeniable heavy vertical street with absolute heavy sky and the physical concrete, strictly me. I watch a single yellow light completely, entirely, strictly turn to black. Somebody completely, finally laying on their physical heavy back, but the heavy rest of the massive tower keeps the absolute light alive. The ultimate, undeniable, heavy physical metropolitan drive. We strictly navigating exactly through the absolute heavy luminous veins, where the absolute heavy concrete mountain completely, strictly reigns. The heavy glass towers are glowing strictly in the dark, leaving an absolute, permanent, undeniable metropolitan mark. We cruising at the bottom of the glowing concrete maze, caught entirely, completely in the heavy artificial midnight haze. Yeah, the glowing yellow windows are entirely shining bright. The undisputed heavy royalty of the absolute physical night. The physical clock is entirely, completely striking the absolute hour of 3. The greatest physical heavy light show that you could entirely ever see. The heavy Cadillac keeps completely, strictly gliding on the wet tar, while I am completely, strictly studying the artificial star. The absolute heavy silence completely, entirely, strictly speaks the loudest truth. A heavy glowing monument completely, exactly to the metropolitan youth. No heavy sun, completely, exactly needed strictly to illuminate the scene. Just the heavy glowing windows completely, strictly, absolutely clean. I push the heavy pedal completely, entirely down to the physical flow, leaving the heavy glowing canyon entirely, exactly wanting more. The undisputed heavy champion, completely navigating the
physical glow.
The heavy truth. Yeah. Yo. I watch a heavy hustler spinning a massive web of deceit, trying to absolutely manipulate the entire physical street. He tells a different story to every single face in the room, building a completely undeniable side of metropolitan tune. The heavy lies are completely stacking exactly like the red bricks, a desperate foundation entirely built on the cheapest tricks. You gotta constantly look directly, completely over your shoulder, while the heavy physical heart grows undeniably, entirely colder. A single falsehood entirely, completely demands a dozen more, until you completely forget exactly what you were lying for. The heavy sweat completely forming entirely on his physical brow, caught completely inside the heavy undeniable physical right now. You can entirely, completely fool the avenue for a short while, but the absolute truth completely outlasts the physical fake smile. Yeah. The heavy shadows completely disappear in the morning light. You gotta keep your absolute physical conscience entirely clean and bright. The honest road is rough, but it absolutely sets you free, exactly how the true metropolitan legends are entirely meant to be. Yeah, the heavy truth is the absolute greatest, undeniably pure gold. The absolute greatest heavy story that the avenue ever told. Yeah, I seen the heavy empires completely strictly crumble to the dust, because they were entirely completely built without a single ounce of trust. A man's physical word is absolutely entirely his absolute bond, the only heavy magic entirely inside the metropolitan pond. When you speak the heavy truth, you never have to memorize the lines, reading the absolute undeniable heavy physical street signs. You sleep completely, soundly, strictly, completely through the dark night, knowing your absolute physical actions were completely exactly right. The counterfeit cats completely strictly trying to cut the heavy line, leaving the absolute undeniably heavy physical honor completely behind. They drinking the heavy poison entirely, completely from a golden cup, while the absolute undeniable truth completely strictly rises up. I keep my heavy vocabulary completely entirely straight and narrow, flying completely flawlessly, exactly like a heavy physical arrow. Yeah. The heavy shadows completely disappear in the morning light. You gotta keep your absolute physical conscience entirely clean and bright. The honest road is rough, but it absolutely sets you free, exactly how the true metropolitan legends are entirely meant to be. Yeah, the heavy truth is the absolute greatest, undeniably pure gold. The absolute greatest heavy story that the avenue ever told. Yeah, you look directly into the eyes of the absolute physical youth, and you entirely, completely gotta hand them the absolute heavy truth. No sugar-coated fables, completely hiding the metropolitan pain, showing exactly how to completely, entirely walk through the heavy rain. If you break a heavy promise entirely, strictly, completely to a friend, that is exactly where the heavy physical brotherhood completely will end. It takes a lifetime to build the absolute undeniable heavy respect, and exactly one single lie to leave the entire foundation completely wrecked. I sit completely, entirely alone, strictly on the wooden porch there, breathing the absolute undeniable, completely heavy and honest air. The harmonica strictly bleeding entirely, completely into the street noise, separating the heavy absolute physical man from the street boy. The honesty entirely, completely acts exactly like an iron shield, standing absolutely, completely undefeated on the physical battlefield. The heavy shadows completely disappear in the morning light. You gotta keep your absolute physical conscience entirely clean and bright. The honest road is rough, but it absolutely sets you free, exactly how the true metropolitan legends are entirely meant to be. Yeah, the heavy truth is the absolute greatest, undeniably pure gold. The
the absolute greatest heavy story that the Avenue ever told.
Yeah. Tracing my thumb across the faded topography lines, looking for the hidden routes where the ancient sun shines. First stop, dropping down on the European grid, doing things that the everyday street hustlers never did. I see the painted fog rolling over the River Thames, navigating through the paper, looking for the cultural gems. Smooth sailing straight down the Mediterranean coast, raising up a silent imaginary traveler's toast. The smell of the old bonnet hits exactly like the salty breeze, moving past the borders with a ridiculous amount of ease. I can hear the Roman chariots echoing on the cobblestone, a magnificent kingdom that I can explore all alone. No need for a ticket, no waiting at the crowded gate. Just me, the G-funk rhythm, and the cartographer's fate. Sailing away on a sea made of ink and gold, unlocking the mysteries that the old map makers hold. We crossing the longitude, riding the paper breeze, bringing the whole wide world down to its knees. Yeah, the city is sleeping right outside my door, but my mind is washing up on a distant shore. Yeah. So turn the page, the color shifts from green to a dusty brown, leaving behind the hustle of the metropolitan town. Welcome to the vast plains of the Serengeti sun, where the cheetahs and the wild gazelles continuously run. I can feel the dry heat radiating right off the map, escaping the invisible walls of the concrete trap. Moving up north to where the pyramids touch the sky, watching the pharaoh's ancient chariots rolling by. The acoustic guitar plucks a melody out in the dunes, lit up by the glow of 1,000 desert moons. I drag a pencil tip right across the trade routes of old stories of spices, frankincense and shimmering gold. The bass line bumps right in time with the caravan march, walking right under the invisible triumphant arch. Sailing away on a sea made of ink and gold, unlocking the mysteries that the old map makers hold. We crossing the longitude, riding the paper breeze, bringing the whole wide world down to its knees. Yeah, the city is sleeping right outside my door, but my mind is washing up on a distant shore. Flip it again, now we stepping into the eastern winds, where the shadow of the massive Himalayan mountain begins, following the Silk Road down into the heart of the east, sitting at the table for a legendary dynasty feast. The paper feels thinner here, worn out by a million looks, the undisputed magic of these oversized historical books. I see the cherry blossoms falling in the Tokyo spring, listening to the melodies that the mountain monks sing, riding the monsoon weather straight through the tropical rain, flushing away every single drop of the neighbor with pain. The brass compass clicks, pointing me towards the rising sun, showing me exactly how this global exploration is done. The drum break keeps the tempo steady like a ticking clock, while I am millions of miles away from my local block. Sailing away on a sea made of ink and gold, unlocking the mysteries that the old map makers hold. We crossing the longitude, riding the paper breeze, bringing the whole wide world down to its knees. Yeah, the city is sleeping right outside my door, but my mind is washing up on a distant shore. Last chapter, crossing over the painted Atlantic blue, finding a completely unexpected and beautiful view. The Caribbean islands scattered like jewels on the page, a perfectly preserved picture from a forgotten age. I trace the Amazon River twisted like a giant snake, knowing exactly what kind of mental focus this journey takes. Down to the icy tips of the southern Patagonian chill, where the air is freezing cold and the water is perfectly still. The journey is wrapping up, the horizon is getting near, but the vision in my head is remaining remarkably clear. I travel the entire globe from the comfort of a wooden chair, breathing in a lung full of the imaginary foreign air. I slowly shut the cover, letting out a satisfied sigh, watching the very last of the imaginary landscapes die. Sailing away on a sea made of ink and gold, unlocking the mysteries that the old map makers hold. We crossing a longitude, riding the paper breeze, bringing the whole wide world down to its knees. Yeah, the city is sleeping right outside my door, but my mind is
washing up
on a distant shore.
back in the room. The coffee is cold. The rain finally stopped hitting the glass. You don't need $1 million to see the world. You just need the right perspective and a quiet mind. Keep your imagination sharp. Keep the bass bumping smooth. Back in the room.
I am sick in heavy fire. The heavy fire. Heavy fire. The heavy shadows, yeah. I am sitting entirely alone underneath the heavy ceiling light, writing the master scripts completely deep into the lonely night. The neighborhood is sleeping, but my physical mind is wide awake, knowing exactly what kind of heavy physical sacrifice it's gonna take. The homies on the corner entirely laughing at the master plan, telling me to drop the pen and be a regular working man. They look at the heavy notebooks and call it an absolute waste of time, because they cannot hear the rhythm of the undeniable physical rhyme. But I am entirely, completely focused strictly on the distant prize, ignoring all the heavy doubt, completely hiding in their physical eyes. The heavy bassline strictly pounding entirely inside my physical chest, preparing the absolute heavy spirit completely for the ultimate test. When the absolute heavy shadows are entirely closing in,
and nobody absolutely
completely believes that you can win.
You gotta hold the heavy,
You gotta hold the heavy physical dream completely, strictly tight and walk
absolutely, completely alone.
exactly through the dark night.
Yeah, the heavy fire,
Entirely, completely burning deep inside the soul.
taking the absolute, undeniable.
Heavy physical metropolitan control. I hear the heavy whispers every single time I walk the block, trying entirely, completely to speed up my heavy internal clock. They say the physical ambition is completely, strictly out of reach. A heavy negative lesson that the metropolitan streets completely teach. But I'm laying down the heavy tracks entirely on the drum machine, directing every single angle of the absolute, undeniable physical scene. You gotta completely, entirely, strictly be your own biggest fan when nobody absolutely, entirely understands the heavy master plan. I close my physical eyes and entirely, completely see the classic Impala glide, cruising strictly down the avenue with the absolute heavy West Coast pride. That is the heavy destination, strictly waiting at the physical end. The heavy reality that the weak minds absolutely cannot comprehend. When the absolute heavy shadows are entirely closing in,
And nobody absolutely,
completely believes that you can win.
you gotta hold the heavy,
You gotta hold the heavy physical dream completely, strictly tight and walk
absolutely, completely alone.
exactly through the dark night. Yeah,
Yeah, the heavy fire,
entirely, completely burning deep inside the soul.
taking the absolute, undeniable.
Heavy physical metropolitan control. The heavy paper is entirely, completely, strictly filling up with the ink, giving the absolute heavy metropolitan universe a completely new way to think. The absolute heavy struggle entirely, strictly builds the heaviest muscle, the undisputed heavy foundation of the physical metropolitan hustle. You look at the empty physical pockets and the heavy worn out shoes, but you absolutely, entirely, completely refuse to ever physically lose. The echo and fender rolls completely, entirely bleeding into the street, providing the absolute heavy soundtrack for my physical moving feet. I am carrying the heavy vision entirely, completely, strictly on my back, refusing to entirely, completely let the heavy physical foundation crack. They want you to absolutely, strictly surrender and completely fall in line, but I am completely, entirely determined to make the physical universe mine. When the absolute heavy shadows are entirely closing in,
And nobody absolutely,
completely believes that you can win.
you gotta hold the heavy,
You gotta hold the heavy physical dream completely, strictly tight and walk
absolutely, completely alone.
exactly through the dark night. Yeah, the heavy fire entirely, completely burning deep inside the soul.
Taking the absolute, undeniable.
Heavy physical metropolitan control. The triumphant brass completely, entirely, strictly swelling in the heavy air, proving that the absolute heavy physical dedication was always there. The heavy laughter, completely, entirely, strictly fading into the dust, replaced entirely, completely by the absolute heavy, undeniable trust. I kept the heavy script completely, entirely, strictly moving straight ahead, ignoring every single negative heavy word that the physical avenue said. The heavy dream is entirely, completely, strictly turning into the real stone. A heavy physical empire that I entirely, completely, strictly built alone. So keep the heavy pen entirely, completely, strictly moving across the page, writing the absolute, undeniable, heavy physical history of this golden age. The absolute heavy belief entirely, strictly, completely conquers the dark, leaving the massive, undeniable, heavy physical and permanent mark. When the absolute heavy shadows are entirely closing in,
And nobody absolutely
completely believes that you can win.
You gotta hold the heavy and
You gotta hold the heavy physical dream completely, strictly tight and walk
absolutely, completely alone.
exactly through the dark night. Yeah, the heavy fire entirely, completely burning deep inside the soul.
Taking the absolute, undeniable.
Heavy physical metropolitan control.
I am sitting in time.
Yeah. I am sitting entirely alone underneath the heavy ceiling light, writing the master scripts completely deep into the lonely night. The neighborhood is sleeping, but my physical mind is wide awake. The neighborhood is sleeping, but my physical mind is wide awake, knowing exactly what kind of heavy physical sacrifice it's gonna take. The homies on the corner entirely laughing at the master plan, telling me to drop the pen and be your regular working man. They look at their heavy notebooks and call it an absolute waste of time, because they cannot hear the rhythm of the undeniable physical rhyme. But I am entirely, completely focused strictly on the distant prize, ignoring all the heavy doubt, completely hiding in their physical eyes. The heavy bassline strictly pounding entirely inside my physical chest, preparing the absolute heavy spirit completely for the ultimate test. When the absolute heavy shadows are entirely closing in, and nobody absolutely, completely believes that you can win. You gotta hold that, you gotta hold the heavy physical dream completely, strictly tight and walk absolutely, completely alone, exactly through the dark night. Yeah, the heavy fire entirely, completely burning deep inside the soul, taking the absolute, undeniable, heavy physical metropolitan control. I'm sitting entirely alone underneath the heavy ceiling light, writing the master scripts from completely deep into the lonely night. The neighborhood is sleeping, but my physical mind is wide awake, knowing exactly what kind of heavy physical sacrifice it's gonna take. The homies on the corner entirely laughing at the master plan, telling me to drop the pen and be a regular working man. They look at their heavy notebooks and call it an app.
Yeah. Walking up the concrete driveway with my heart beating fast, hoping this specific Friday evening is permanently built to last. I ring the doorbell, shifting my weight from left to right, praying that my vocabulary is working perfectly tonight. The heavy oak door swings open and the breath catches in my chest. She is standing on the porch looking absolutely at her best. A simple floral dress and a smile that outshines the street lamp, making me feel exactly like a heavyweight romantic champ. We step off the curb, walking slowly down the neighborhood block, ignoring the steady ticking of the imaginary clock. The evening breeze is warm, blowing gently through the maple trees, putting my nervous racing adolescent mind completely at ease, heading straight toward the glowing neon of the local marquee. The most beautiful reality that my young eyes could ever see.
Underneath the bright lights,
waiting in the ticket line,
hoping that this magical evening
turns out perfectly fine.
first love blooming right inside the shadows of the dark.
Lighting up a permanent and undeniable
Heavy spark.
Yeah, the silver screen is shining,
but I'm looking at your face,
caught up in the rhythm.
of this beautiful and innocent space.
Yeah, we step inside the lobby, stepping on the patterned carpet floor, leaving the noisy avenue completely outside the heavy glass door. The smell of the melted butter and the roasted peanuts fills the air, walking side by side without a single metropolitan care. I slide a crisp $10 bill right under the glass window pane, protecting my precious cargo from the sudden evening rain. The cashier slides the red paper stub straight into my palm, trying my absolute hardest to remain incredibly cool and calm. We grab a large cardboard bucket and 2 sodas with the ice, willing to pay the undisputed heavy romantic price. The usher rips the tickets, pointing down the dimly lit hall, answering the ultimate undeniable teenage romantic call, finding the perfect velvet seats right there in the middle row. Waiting for the heavy curtains to open up, the picture show.
Underneath the bright lights,
Waiting in the ticket line,
hoping that this magical evening
turns out perfectly fine.
first love blooming right inside the shadows of the dark.
Lighting up a permanent and undeniable.
Terrible heavy spark,
Yeah, the silver screen is shining, but
but I'm looking at your face,
caught up in the rhythm.
of this beautiful and innocent space.
The house lights slowly dim until the theater is pitch and black. There is absolutely no way that I am ever turning back. The projector starts to work, throwing the beam, a dancing light, cutting a brilliant path directly through the middle of the night. The previews are playing loud, but my focus is completely on a hand, resting on the armrest, exploring an uncharted piece of land. I do the classic stretch, moving my arm gently across the back, making sure my physical execution is undeniably exact. My fingers brush her shoulder and she leans a little closer, in the greatest undisputed victory that a young man could ever win. The saxophone is crying softly right underneath the dialogue, lifting me completely out of the heavy adolescent fog. The movie is a masterpiece, but I couldn't tell you what it's about, because my romantic confidence has finally erased the doubt.
Underneath the bright lights, waiting in the ticket line, hoping that this magical evening
Turns out perfectly fine.
first love blooming right inside the shadows of the dark.
Lighting up a permanent and undeniable.
Terrible heavy spark,
Yeah, the silver screen is shining, but I'm
looking at your face,
caught up in the rhythm.
of this beautiful and innocent space.
The credits start to roll, the bright letters crawling up the screen. The sweetest cinematic ending that the neighborhood has seen. We walk back out into the cool and refreshing midnight air, with the magical feeling of the evening settling everywhere. The walk back to a house feels like floating on a summer cloud. The crickets in the bushes singing the melody incredibly loud. We reach the front steps, standing quietly beneath the porch light, the absolute heavy culmination of a legendary night. She looks up with those deep eyes, reflecting the glowing moon, hoping that this perfect interaction doesn't end too soon. I'm leaning incredibly slow, capturing the absolute first kiss, a state of pure, uninterrupted, and undeniably heavy bliss. She smiles and turns the brass key, slipping safely through the door, leaving my young and beating heart
completely begging for more.